call it to order. Can we have
Commissioner Funabashi?
Here.
Commissioner Bajaj?
Present.
Vice Chair Min?
Here.
Chair Simpson?
I am here. So the next item would be the salute to the flag. Does someone want to display one? There we are. Perfect. Okay. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the order of agenda.
I'll second it.
All right. Do we need to do a roll call on that, or can we just?
I don't think we need a roll call on that one, right?
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Let's see, we've approved the order of the agenda. We need, I guess we have to move to accept the blue folder items. Is that correct? I know there are some.
Yes, you do.
And it requires a motion to accept those, right? So will somebody make a motion?
I make a motion to accept the blue folder item.
And I'll
Thank you, Commissioner
second.
Glass, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Funabashi. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we accepted the blue folder items, which I guess refer to item Q on our Q2 on our agenda. Next would be the consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull either of those items, the affidavit of posting or the meeting minutes, out for separate discussion? Okay, seeing no one asking a question to do that, can we have a motion to accept the consent calendar?
Make a motion to accept the.
I'll make a motion to accept the.
I think Commissioner Min made it first, so we'll take Commissioner Funabashi as the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we've accepted the consent calendar items. We're now at item H, which is the time when there is for public participation on any non-agenda items. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak about something that is not on our agenda? Okay, seeing no one wanting to do that, we would then.
Commissioner Simpson, if I might interrupt you, Lauren, do we have any e-comments or anything on non-agenda items?
I'm sorry, Lauren, did you hear that?
You're muted up, Lauren.
Sorry, there's no e-comments at this time.
Thank you very much. I guess that means we now can move to our joint meeting, and I guess we need to recess to a special joint meeting of the Public Works Commission and Budget and Finance Commission. Does that require a motion? Or do I just declare we've recessed to that?
I don't think there's a motion required. You just recess to the joint meeting.
All right, well, we're now recessing to the joint meeting, and I guess someone needs to call that to order. I guess I'm calling that to order, and then I guess we have a roll call.
And Chairperson Simpson, if I may interject, I'm going to ask Lauren to go ahead and do the roll call for the Public Works Commissioners and Doug Kaku to do the roll call for the Budget and Finance Commission.
Okay. Commissioner Arata,
Present.
Commissioner Glass,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia. No response. Commissioner Funabashi,
Here.
Commissioner Bajaj,
Here.
Vice Chair Min,
Chair.
Chair Simpson.
I am here.
And for the Budget Finance Commission, Commissioner Jesty,
Here.
Commissioner Solomon,
Present.
Commissioner Samples,
Present.
Commissioner Conroy,
Here.
Commissioner Marin,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Chair Woodham.
Here.
Thank you.
Oh, we have to elect a temporary chairperson for the joint session.
Since it's your commission, I nominate you as chair of the
Okay.
this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I will continue to try to keep us moving forward in a productive manner. And that would bring us, I guess, to the main reason for us having this meeting, and that I gather is item L1, discussion regarding the proposed 2022-23 FY funding for capital improvement projects. So who is going to make that presentation?
Chairperson Simpson, Ted Saman, Public Works Director, I'm not making the full presentation, but I guess this is the right time for me to ask Jesse to share the screen and show the slides, and then we'll start the presentation.
Give me 1 second here.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. And again, joint commissioners, my name is Ted Saman, I'm the Public Works Director for the city. We're here, what we do annually is we come to this joint meeting at which time we present to you our draft proposal for the 5-year capital improvement program. In reality, it's also asking for which projects to be funded in the upcoming fiscal year, while the others are unfunded projects and just placeholders essentially for what we would like to do. Joining me tonight are going to be Andy Wingy, our city engineer, and Jesse Reyes, our CIP administration manager. We will be tag teaming for the presentation itself as we go through that with you tonight. So Jesse, let's go to the next slide. This is just a quick little outline of how we're going to be presenting the slides to you. You know, why is the CIP important? What are some of the CIP's accomplishments? Active projects, and we're going to talk about these active projects as projects that are in construction, projects that are in design, projects that are in design ready to be accepted to move into the construction phase, etc. What the next steps are going to be as far as the CIP budget itself and the evaluation criteria. What are some of the criteria that we use to prioritize what we propose to you in the draft format? And then the CIP recommendations, what the carryover projects are, what phase of carryover are they, and then obviously the draft 22-23 recommended list of projects that we have as staff to you as a joint commission to solicit your input. Jesse, next one. I think this is right back to you.
Yep. So good evening, commissioners. Jesse Reyes, CIP manager. As Ted mentioned, we're going to tag team this presentation. So why is the CIP important? CIPs are necessary for maintaining the quality of life for Redondo Beach residents, businesses, and visitors alike. They help maintain the health and safety of the city by ensuring the infrastructure, including buildings, streets, underground infrastructure, is promoting the health and safety of everyone in the city. The good infrastructure also helps maintain and increase property values. CIPs also assist in economic development by investing in the infrastructure that is needed to make a city a desired location. It also assists in limiting the city's liability by addressing potential hazards, such as uplifted sidewalks, to name one. Now I'll kick it over to Andy.
Andy, you're muted. Andy, you're muted.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. I got so excited, I forgot that. I'm going to go through some of the projects that we've recently finished and also look at some of the projects that are in the process right now. As Ted mentioned, see a few of them on our screen. We finished a second phase of our citywide Slurry seal program, which is a program we started a couple of years ago to help preserve the life of our residential streets primarily, extending the duration of time before we have to resurface them. It's something we hadn't done in the city for 15 or 20 years before we started this recent second or first phase and then second phase. You see a picture there of our new sign at the Performing Arts Center, which was installed. Our council chamber project was finished, about a $2 million project finished early in this fiscal year. We are looking forward to cutting the ribbon, so to speak, on that in May with our city council meeting. That'll be the first, well, actually the second meeting in there since it's been completed. Looking forward to putting that one back to use. And then another photo of the Morel House there with our new roof on that. Lots of other projects have been completed. These are some of the highlights. Traffic calming continues to be something that we are implementing all the time. And in this case, some speed cushions in the kind of Englewood corridor neighborhood that we call it there. Jesse, if you go to the next one, please. We have a number of projects under construction, most notably our transit center, which has been 10 years or so. We had a lot of progress done on that in this current fiscal year. We're about 2/3 of the way done with that project. I'm sure if you've been on Kingsdale at all, you've noticed it, and plenty of activity up there. New signals, new building, about a 2,800 square foot building. Lots of new concrete for the bus route, new parking lot, curb improvements, that kind of thing. So that's about a $15 million project, construction project in total. And the next phase of that will be on improving the north part, the intersection of Kingsdale and Artesia. We also are getting ready to start the Englewood and Hampton Beach Boulevard intersection improvement project. This one was awarded last fall. We gave the contractor a limited notice to proceed to pre-purchase some of our long lead time items. They are now, as I understand it, in his yard, and we're just working on a scheduling date to get that project started at the corner of Englewood and Manhattan Beach Boulevard. That's a right turn lane improvement project. On the pier, we have a number of projects in play. We're currently remodeling, refinishing the pier restrooms at the end of the Mont Pier. Pier railing project is just been coming up for award, I think, on May 3rd. This project to replace all of our steel railings or recoat our railings, the steel colored railing and the bollards that are out there with them. We're also replacing light fixtures all around the pier with, we've purchased all those fixtures and poles already, and our city crew and supplemental staff will be installing those over the next months. May have heard about our skate park project in Perry Park that was recently installed. That was kind of a small project. We have a bigger project coming to Pad 10 that's currently finishing up its design, and we're looking at that being completed by the end of June. Beryl Street was awarded last council meeting, and this is a project to improve the blocks between Prospect and Flagler lanes with improved pedestrian treatments along the southern edge, some bulb outs to improve the crossings, resurfacing, some drainage improvements, some infiltration, Green Street type features as well. So that's an exciting project for us. Alta Vista is one of our sewer pump stations in the city. This is a big couple $1 million project that has begun over in the Alta Vista parking lot area. That will be ongoing through November. And then our Harbor Patrol Dock replacement project is something that we have awarded, and first phases of that are for the contractor to do what's called a deferred submittal, where they'll work on the actual design of the concrete docks, submit that to us, and then when we give them the okay, begin to manufacture those and then install those later. So that one's underway as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our residential rehabilitation project, this is an annual project that we fund, and when we collect funding over a year or two, then we put together a big project to resurface our residential streets, grind and overlay typically, along with concrete work related to curb ramps and pedestrian improvements that might be needed. Our Manhattan Beach Boulevard project, resurfacing project, is also in design phase. That's all the way from Aviation to Englewood, the entire length of the width of the city along Manhattan Beach Boulevard. We'll do some signal improvements at the Vale intersection, and also some median improvements in that project. Torrance Boulevard resurfacing is design is nearly complete. That's entire length of the city from the Torrance city boundary all the way to the pier. Resurfacing there, some improvements in the alignment at the Catalina intersection, block between Catalina and Broadway, to allow some class 2 bike lanes. So we'll have continuous class 2 bike lanes from the eastern border with Torrance all the way to the pier, and that project is done. Dominguez Park is getting some improvement at the playground, which is the graphic you see there, the rendering for kind of the approved concept, as well as some perimeter help with drainage and slope stabilization, especially on the north side of the park. Those are both in design stage right now. We have 2 other pump stations that are through their design. Actually, we're trying to get permitting from the regional board. We have to do some dewatering there during the construction, and so they require us to get a permit before we discharge that construction water back into the ocean. So that's a bit of an arduous process that we're going through right now with them, but that one will probably, those projects will come online about midway through the next fiscal year. And then we have a harbor dredging project that we also have completed the design. We were ready to go almost a year ago when we submitted to the Army Corps for our permit to do the work out there, and due to some federal rulemaking problems, the EPA told the Army Corps to stop with any kind of permitting. So it's been kind of in abeyance until that gets rectified and resolved. We have had some recent movement on that. We hope to do that work in the winter of the next fiscal year. And then I think this is my last one, but our bicycle transportation plan, that's a big popular project. People want to know what we're doing to improve the bike network. And so a number of streets here that are currently in our plan for design. We have a grant from Metro, several years old actually, but it needs to approval by Caltrans before we can begin to implement this. So we are going through the process, their review process called E76 process. And once that's done, we'll be able to implement bicycle facility improvements on these streets. We have a couple of these streets are not in that project, but they're in other projects that are underway. So lots of work going on in our bicycle and active transportation network.
All right, so it comes back to me now. What are the
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. You know, the recommendations of the staff to the CIP committee. So the CIP committee is consistent of multiple departments in the city, as well as the city manager's office, going through the existing projects, going through what we have heard from the council through their strategic plan, other priorities that they've identified to us, and we start to draft up what those potential projects are. What we come to you tonight is, as Budget and Finance and Public Works Commission, seeking your feedback and your input on this draft proposed CIP project that's going to go to the city manager, and eventually it'll make its way to the city council. The rest of these items that are there are essentially out of the budget calendar, where the city manager proposed budget will be submitted to the city council on May 16th, as per the city's charter. And then we will take the CIP to the Planning Commission for their review on May the 26th, just to make sure it conforms to the general plan of the city, which is really a visioning document for the entire city, at which time then will be followed by the city manager, proposed budget, to you as a Budget and Finance Commission on May the 26th and come back to you one more time in June to talk about the overall budget. That's both operating budget and capital improvement project budget itself. So next slide, Jesse. So the evaluation criteria, as we talked a little bit earlier, what are some of those reasons? Health and safety. COVID, I think, is the prime example that we could use today in terms of what those health and safety things are. The pandemic hit upon us. There were changes that we needed to do to all of our facilities, not only in the immediate time, but we also had to do improvements out for the public. And then as we started to come back, even under a hybrid program, we needed to do a lot of facility improvements to protect our employees that were actually here. And are these projects mandated? There are a lot of state and federal requirements and or legislation that forces us to change things or to implement things in a different manner. Is it one of those kinds of projects that we have to address a mandate that has now become effective because of that legislation? Does a project implement a strategic plan goal that the City Council has identified? That's one of the highest priorities and methods that we try to identify the priorities based on that direction that the City Council has basically been giving us. Does it complete an existing project? And in many ways, as you approve the 5-year capital budget, there are years where we have an initial year for design or conceptual design of a project. It's already been identified as a priority, but it's not necessarily fully funded for both pre-design, conceptual design, if you will, design and then construction. Does it actually complete that project? And that's something that we want to have continuous movement on the project. So if we've gotten funding for conceptual design and or for design, we're going to come back and ask for funding to either do the construction, or in some cases, as you'll see with projects that are going to come up in a few minutes, is it a project that was budgeted, and I'm going to be hypothetical, with $800,000 for construction, but seeing how construction costs, material costs have skyrocketed over the past several months, up to 30% in many cases, are we going to need additional funding as we prepare that project to go to its construction phase? Does it support economic development in the city? We want our city to look the best. We want it to be attractive. We want it to be clean. We want it to be refreshed. That is always an incentivizer for businesses to invest further in their own facilities and or to attract new businesses into the community. So it's got to support that economic development of the city. And then will it result in future operating savings? For us, one of the key objectives that we have is to try to predicate a lot of the work, anticipate a lot of the work, if you will, and I'll use the Pier parking structure, the Pier itself as one of those perfect examples. We don't want to have emergency work show up based on significant issues that happen. We'd rather be able to anticipate that work to come, plan the work, design the work in advance, and actually have the time to bid that work in advance so that we can get competitive bidding. We've been utilizing that for the Pier itself by having an assessment made every few years, and then we implement the changes under that recommendation so that they're all planned work. The Pier parking structure is another perfect example where we will be talking more in depth about it later on, but it's one of those projects that we brought in Walker Parking. They did an assessment and evaluation of the structure and started to recommend an implementation plan, a phasing plan, if you will, for those improvements. Does that result in savings? Absolutely. When we're able to get competitive bidding for construction, it's much better than us being reactive with emergency construction costs. And is there significant outside funding? In certain cases, we have projects that are awarded grant funding. Many of the times, grant funding requires some sort of a city match. In most cases, it's a 30% match by the city. So essentially, are we having a savings to the city? Absolutely, because we're paying 30 cents on the dollar in order to implement it from that grant funding. And in many cases, if it's grant funding that's going to fund this 100%, then it should be a priority to make sure that we are in line with the granting entity for that. Jesse, next slide.
So here we're going to get into more details on the funding and actual projects. What we have here is a snapshot in time from last week, April 21st, that shows an estimated carryover funding for next year. Carryover funding is funding that's been appropriated to a specific project, but has not been encumbered or expensed. This can happen for a multitude of reasons, such as different phases of projects, delays that are outside the city's control, and work that crosses multiple fiscal years. As illustrated, we have a projected carryover amount of close to $54 million. Large portions of these, especially on the streets categories, are regional metro funds, such as the Englewood at MBB that Andy spoke about earlier. That's $4.1 million in metro funding. And the North Redondo Beach Bike Extension, that's also another $1 million that we got from Metro. So that makes up a large portion of some of these totals. This slide represents the draft CIP funding by category for fiscal year 22-23. As you see, we have 7 CIP categories: sewer, drainage, streets, waterfront, park, public facilities, and general improvements. It's close to $40 million, which represents a pretty healthy CIP program. A couple key points I would like to point out is that out of the $40 million, a little more than that is a little more than 1/3 is grant funding, and only 22.5% of the draft recommended funding is completely discretionary. So just wanted to point that out, given that these are sizable dollar figures, but most of it is restricted in how they can be used.
Hey, Jesse, can we pause for a second? I see 3 hands on my screen. I don't know if there are more, but this may be an opportunity, Chairperson Simpson, to go back to the commission and answer some of their questions before we continue on. Joint Commission Chair Simpson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I was muted and I couldn't find myself to unmute. I see Commissioner Samples has his hand up first. Let's go to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you'll go back one slide and talk about the carryover funding, you're showing almost $54 million in carryover funding. In the original 21 to 26 5-year capital plan, the estimate was that the carryover funding in 21 would be $12 million. Can you talk a little bit about the $40 million delta? What has not been spent and what hasn't been done that really needs to be done?
Without really being able to see the details of last year's, I'd be speaking without much detail. I know we've been awarded several grants that could make up a portion of that delta. A lot of the funding that was appropriated last fiscal year has not been spent. We've done a lot of design, and Andy and Ted can get into more details if you want. We've done a lot of design and preliminary work on a lot of these projects, but we haven't really gotten into a lot of construction phases in many of these, which creates a large carryover amount.
Is there any special reason for the delays? Because the 21-22 projected total funding was supposed to be $33 million, of which $20 million was current and almost $13 million was a carryover. This carryover funding is rising exponentially. It sounds like projects aren't getting done. Can anybody talk about what the holdup is?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in, Commissioner Samples. There's several projects that are in construction and several projects, as Jesse said, that are actually in design. Several big ticket items, including the transit center itself, which is, I have my numbers here in front of me, approximately $15 million as a project by itself. There have been progress payments that are made. It is a project that is still in construction, but until we complete that project, you may not see a significant portion of that money spent out. And until it's actually expended, it'll continue to carry as a carry over, but it's not actually an incomplete project. It's a project that's very much in motion. Several of our projects are actually in design, and Andy mentioned 3 of them in particular. The dredging project is being held up by outside permitting agency. The 2 sewer pump stations that he mentioned, Portofino and the other one down in the harbor area, those are both designed. They are ready for construction. We're still waiting for outside agency permitting. That's several $1 million that's tied up. So those kinds of projects would get held up just because of that process. Or they could be, certain design criteria that we've ran into that needed further assessment. And I'll mention that Manhattan Beach Boulevard is one of those projects that is about $3 million in total. It is one that we've ran into some complexities in the design, and it's being wrapped up at this particular point. You'll be seeing by the time we do this again next year, we'll be talking a lot more projects that are in construction, but that's why you will see a carryover fund that's a little bit higher, because these projects are sort of held up until those permits can allow us to go into construction.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. The numbers looked so big, and once again, looking at that proposed plan, 5-year plan, it's one of the things that I noticed was the original 5-year plan said that total expenditure for streets, for instance, was going to be $23,862,000, and we've got $25 million in carry forwards, which sounds like streets aren't getting done. So that's why I was thinking about that. But thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just use that as one example, because the residential street rehab project is just shy of $5 million. That is a carryover for certain amounts of monies. And that in itself is 20% of that $25 million fund by itself. All
right.
One of the other dynamics is that when we get a funding agreement with Metro, who funds a lot of our Measure R, Measure M projects, we appropriate all that money through the funding agreement up front. And sometimes these are 3 to 5 year projects.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that money sits idle until we're able to actually begin the construction process. But because of the way the funding agreement works, we appropriate all that on the revenue side and the expense side in that on that first year. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm sure it'll all get worked out, but it was just kind of a surprise.
Well, and just to be quite frank, we've been a little bit understaffed this year, and running 100 miles an hour with all that. So that's also something we're addressing, not on the CIP side as much as the operations side. But yeah, we're fully aware that we've got a big backlog, and we're working hard. Actually had a new employee come on today, which was great. That'll help us ease the burden a little bit. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting some more help and getting some of this backlog cleared out.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Solomon, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Simpson. Jesse or Andy, with regard to prioritizing some of the carryover funding or some of these projects, Andy, you were talking about us appropriating these funds many times from other agencies. Do any of those funds have ticking clock or otherwise timelines where they may try and claw back some of that money?
We've had our bicycle project, for instance, is a 10-year-old call for projects grant that we are just getting to. They're just beginning to put some pressure on us to get that done. And we've had conversations. Whether it's clawed back, I don't know. I think they want to see these projects done as much as anybody. So they're content with the fact that we have, begun that process, and we're going to Caltrans to get our approvals. We have another project that's also pretty old, the Grant Avenue project for the signal improvements. One of those funding sources was going to expire in February. We scrambled a little bit last year and asked the Metro, the funding agency, if we could just purchase the equipment, because the actual bids to purchase and install the equipment came in much higher than we had money to do. So we used their budget, their funding to purchase the equipment. And then another bit of funding from them that wasn't going to expire, we've introduced that to be able to install. So we're watching that very closely. Metro is operating for most of their Measure M projects on a 3-year. You have 3 years to implement the money, and then they go to a year-to-year extension process. And they're pretty generous so far with their extensions. We don't get too much pushback on that. It's just a matter of getting paperwork done. They often don't even get us our extension. It gets approved according to their fiscal year in the summer. And by the time we get the paperwork from their attorneys, it's April or May. So it literally only lasts another month before we have to go out and start doing another extension. But there's no problem as long as we're moving forward on the projects with Metro. So, and those are the big ticket items on our streets programs.
Okay, well, if you all aren't going to worry about it, then I wouldn't worry about it. It might be valuable with regard then to currently unfunded projects, where we might look at something and say, well, you really want to look at prioritizing maybe these unfunded projects, because if we don't appropriate the funds now, we might lose the opportunity in the short term to do that. Then, Jesse, would you please go to the next slide? So with regard to the draft, the CIP funding here, when you're identifying these funds, we don't identify as a subtext of where these funds are coming from. For example, for the park project, are those from Quimby? Is that from general fund? Is that from some other type of metro or county or state funding? Is there a value in us knowing what the source of those funds are to perhaps prioritize something, or you're able to go ahead and let us know, look, this is something that's unfunded. It's a Measure R as an example, and it's something you may want to look at because there could be a clock on it, or this is a fund that we have within the city. We're in control. It's Quimby. And if you decide to not to fund this right now, then we could move it to another year and there wouldn't be much of an impact.
Yeah, so most of these, especially, the streets, we kind of have an estimate revenue projections for, SB1 money, for our local return measure R, Prop C, local return measure M. So we kind of program it based off of what we see revenues coming in. Some of the discretionary projects, which will be discussed, by council and the commissions, those are up for discretion, and they can be funded or not funded depending on the desires of the commission and the council. But we program based off what we assume we will have in revenue to be able to fund these projects. And we do have a running spreadsheet that has all the different funding sources and assigned to different projects. Just for this presentation, it's a lot of information, so we didn't put it to not confuse everybody with all the data and information.
Okay, great, thanks.
Jesse,
the team is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ted.
I was going to say, Jesse, I was going to add to that. Commissioner Solomon, we've got more slides that go specifically into each of these funding sources and which projects are coming forward. But to answer your first question on the park projects, yes, it's going to be Quimby. About 500,000 of that 530 is going to be for Dominguez, which is a regional park and qualifies for those Quimby funds.
Okay, thanks. And I'll hold off asking Quimby questions. Thanks for explaining that in a little greater detail.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Conroy.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this presentation you guys are putting on this evening. Question, did anybody get a copy of this presentation or any list of CIP projects prior to the meeting? Because I didn't see getting it, and it would have been helpful to review some of this.
No, it wasn't in the package.
Was not?
Was not. You're all seeing it for the first time, as this was a work in progress, and you'll obviously have time to mull over it after tonight. And again, we're here to answer any questions that you may have and helping you to formulate, further questions or comments.
Sure. Okay. I understand it's a work in progress. It'll probably continue to evolve and change over time. I would just suggest that even if it was presented as a blue folder item, I would have appreciated being able to see this information prior to your presentation. Okay. Question on the slurry coats. I believe that project's been going on for approximately 2 years already. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it said we're in phase 2. How many phases are there, and when are we? What's the estimated completion date?
So we have a kind of a 3-pronged program to take care of our streets. One is slurry, one is our grind and overlay, and then the others are deferred maintenance projects. So In 2017, the council kind of approved that approach. We do, and I'm sorry, I'm giving you a long answer here, but it helps to know some of the background. We do, and every 3 years, we do an evaluation of all our street surfaces through LiDAR, kind of a pretty fancy electronic means to do that. That data is assimilated, studied. We have a consultant who puts forward a big software package that it includes prioritization of all these streets, and it kind of spits out what our next 3 years ought to be doing. So we anticipate continuing. We're on cycle 2 of our residential rehab. We're calling it cycle 2. It was started in 2018 or 19. Jesse, help me with the dates, but we're in the second phase of Slurry. We're in about the 3rd or 4th, maybe it's the 4th phase coming up of residential rehab. But we anticipate that those will continue. We have a through 2030 window that we looked at initially with this whole program. So when we get to 2030, we will be done with what the council directed us to do at looking kind of at a 10-year program for rolling this out. We will still have a number of streets that are deferred maintenance. We will not have touched them in that 10-year period based on the funding plan that council identified at the beginning of that 10 years. And so we'll reassess at that point if we'll continue. Slurry, we typically apply at kind of a 5 to 7 year interval after new streets have been repaved. So that, whereas repaving we would do maybe every 15 or 20 years. So there's some calculus out there that will help us find the right timing of when to emphasize Slurry and when to emphasize the other prongs of our attack. So it's a hard question to answer kind of forever, but we're looking at our current model is a 3-year model to address residential streets in both Slurry and in the deferred maintenance and the grind and overlay portions of that. So presented that to council a few months ago. I can get you the date if you would like to look at a report on kind of how that works.
Andy, if I can add to that, I mean, it's not forever, but it's going to be continuous. I think we have enough roadway surface and the age of our infrastructure that you will be seeing a Slurry program for years to come. It'll be continuous almost on an annual basis. We will have several listing of streets that will go through the Slurry ceiling, as well as we will have the residential street rehab. So even after we complete the 10-year cycle, which is what the council's directive was, and their objective to our roadway surface, condition, I think you'll be seeing some level of that on an annual basis, just ongoing. Forever is a long time, but it'll be ongoing for quite a while.
Well, that does help answer my question, and certainly the rehab work you've done on the streets along with the Slurry coats. I mean, the streets look fantastic when you're done with them. Is there any kind of timeline or block of time that the public can see to get an idea of maybe when their street or their block or their neighborhood is going to get this treatment?
Yeah, there certainly is. The council report I referred to a moment ago has a 3-year work plan in it, and that's as far as we really project out in terms of specific streets. Council elaborates on which streets we do based on the recommendations from our pavement management system. And so those are selected. And then if there's, we get good pricing maybe, and we can do a few more streets than we thought, then we'll go back to the council and take off the, list B to add to those. And that kind of thing. That's
right. Thank you. Moving on. Along similar lines, I saw the Pier railings restoration replacements in your presentation this evening, and I recall seeing that in the presentation or discussion from last year as well. I was just curious, was that project delayed at all, or is that just a project that lasts more than 1 year?
We had started out that project using city crews, and so it was meant to be kind of a slow burn project. They would work on it for not their full schedule, but portions of their schedule. It just wasn't going fast enough and there was too much work to be done. So we pulled it back and put it out for bid. And so that's what we'll be awarding on the 3rd of May, or at least council will be presented with that to award a construction contract to an out contractor. So some delay, but it really just a rethinking of how we implement it and getting the specifications put together.
Do we expect it to be completed in fiscal year 22-23?
Lauren, do you remember how many working days we had on that one? You on still?
156 working days.
So yeah, assuming we are able to award it, about the end of this fiscal year, 150 working days would take us through, January, March of next year.
Okay, thank you again. I see other hands, so I'm going to cut it off there for now. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Woodham, you have your hand up.
Yes, I guess I have to admit to being somewhat confused by the data. It's tough following this, not having had a chance to look at it ahead of time. I understand the difficulty of preparing this when you're doing your day job as well. So it's understandable. But let me suggest this: if you're expecting input from budget and finance, and I think on individual projects, it'd be helpful year after year to come back to us with sort of on a line item basis or project basis. What was the original cost estimate? What's the current cost estimate? How much have you spent to date? How much of that original total cost is coming from grants and how much is coming out of the general fund? And the result of that is how much is remaining to be spent and how much is to be spent in the current year. I don't really know what action items we were to take away from this tonight, because I don't see yet any decisions we can make other than asking piecemeal questions as we're doing. But this just doesn't seem like it's going the way I'd like to see it go. I don't know enough about what we're talking about here to feel comfortable. And I think if we can present the data in a slightly different way at either some meeting in the future, it'd be helpful from my standpoint. I won't speak for the rest of budget and finance, but that's at least my perspective.
If I could add, Commissioner Woodham, we are going to get into more details on specific projects and potential funding recommendations in each of these categories. So you will have a chance to speak on specific projects and funding that is recommended for the upcoming fiscal year on certain projects.
And that follows in the rest of the presentation, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah, and one of the questions that was raised earlier was a suggestion that we'd be able to discuss the impact of inflation. That's where seeing the original cost estimate for a project and the current cost estimate would be helpful, because there at least two ways there's a delta between those. Number one, if we miscalculated at the beginning, and number two, if the cost of steel has gone up by 50% or asphalt has gone up by 50%, and we need to be able to discuss those two different kinds of differences. So hopefully the data will allow us to do that.
Yeah, we'll get to that granular of detail. And for full transparency, we have 121 projects on our current CIP list. About half of those are recommended for funding next year. So it just, in terms, just for time purposes, we'd need multiple meetings to be able to dig into more granular.
I understand that, and I don't want to get granular on everything, but there are projects of a certain size that we certainly should be able to look at on that granular detail, and others we clearly don't want to. So.
And Jesse, let me answer this one. I mean, I understand, Commissioner, what you're looking for. Really, with all these projects, the math of where we started, how it's moving, isn't as significant. I can say that during the last couple of years, the cost of construction and material has gone beyond anything that we would have been able to project years ago.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The carryovers have been, it was a projected 5%, 3%, 7% cost increases. The 30% that we're seeing today, the material delays that we're seeing today are not something that we would have ever projected. And I think with a lot of these projects, when that showed up, that's an anomaly that none of us could have predicted. But a lot of these projects themselves, and I know, again, this particular slide is more of a 50,000 foot level. We're going to get into the granular projects and overall cost of each of the projects, not necessarily by line items, but when we talk about sewer, what is that $5.7 million consisting of? And we're going to go ahead and go through that for you guys. I think we're barely halfway through the presentation, and that may give you more insight, and that may open up additional questions that you may have.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Ways that we want from you is, are we going down the right path? Are we recommending the right type of projects and right type of improvements? Are we using these funds, which many of these funds, whether they be grant funding and or enterprise type funds, are we separating them wisely and proposing projects in line with what you foresee as a priority for the city?
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks.
Can I just ask a procedural question here? This comes back to the Budget and Finance Committee another couple of times. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Those will come back as part of an overall budget discussion.
But it will not come back to Public Works, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood that. I see Commissioner Jesta has a hand raised. Commissioner Wooden, could you put your hand down, please?
Yeah, sure.
Commissioner Jesta?
Yeah, is it possible to figure out what percentage of funding is allocated for each of the evaluation criteria that you had shown in an earlier slide? For example, how much of the funding, what percentage of the total will be spent on health and safety related issues? How much is mandated? How much for economic development? Things like that, so we can get some idea of how much we have to spend because it is mandated, and what percentage is going to be allocated for economic development.
Yeah, I'm not certain we can divide them in that manner. Those are qualitative elements that we look at that will drive where we prioritize our CIPs and which ones do we prioritize for the upcoming fiscal year, which ones we program into the following fiscal years, and what phase of that project is going to be moving forward. I think what you'll see with a lot of these, they're also very interrelated. When we talk about sewer projects, these are health and safety projects. Nobody wants to have an infrastructure, a sewage infrastructure that may have disruptions to service or problems, or, we used to have a lot of sewer overflows. There's been significant amount of capital improvements that have reduced that significantly so that we're not having those overflows in the same manner. But, is that a safety requirement? Is that a health and safety improvement? Is that a mandated improvement? But it also goes into that realm as well. It's hard to quantitate them in that manner, but they are all interrelated. And those are the qualitative elements that we will use in order to recommend these draft projects as we move forward.
Yeah, when any project overlaps two or more criteria, then we can certainly allocate by percentage, or the most significant criteria is what should dictate the funding. For example, if something is mandated, it doesn't matter whether it's for health or safety or for some other reason. It's mandated, so you have to spend the money. So it should fall into that category. I'm just trying to figure out how much money are we spending or how much are we allocating for economic development.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Thank you otherwise. I appreciate it.
So may I suggest we continue with the presentation? I think maybe some of the questions will be clear as you carry on.
Okay, so now we're going to get the categories and kind of specific projects for the recommended funding. We'll start with the sewer improvement projects. First category, sewer improvement projects. A lot of people don't get super excited for sewer. They're large projects, both in scope and in dollars. And they're crucial, as Ted kind of pointed out, to ensuring that, the wastewater in Redondo Beach is not spilling into the streets, and it's making it safely to the county sanitation facility. So in regards to new CIP projects, we have the sanitary sewer system camera inspection. It's a requirement that the entire sewer infrastructure is inspected and recorded via camera to ensure the integrity of the system. So there's a recommended $1 million to go to this project to be able to camera the entire system. With additional funding to existing projects, we're looking, as Andy mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're looking forward to moving forward with the construction phase of both Portofino and Yacht Club Way pump station as soon as we can obtain the permits from the regional board and address any of their concerns. So the total appropriation for next year recommended is $5.74 million. And this is all wastewater funds. It's an enterprise fund specific to wastewater purposes. We'll go on to the next one. I'll hand it off to Andy.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. 3 projects here. One new one, Fulton Playfield Infiltration Project. This is in response to a regional board requirement to address stormwater quality. We had a project previously approved. We work with a group, the Beach Cities Watershed Management Group, which is Hermosa, Redondo, Manhattan, as well as the city of Torrance and LA County for their portions that are in that drainage. We had a project previously approved to build on the Hermosa Beach Greenbelt. City of Hermosa Beach rejected that project kind of late in the game. And so this is a replacement project. We were very fortunate. We just received word that we had got the kind of verbal thumbs up from the committee from Measure W that assigns money out of the Measure W's regional project fund. It's about $19 million every year. We won $4.5 million of it for this project. So this is all Measure W regional money, grant award money. It's not officially funded yet, but we have the approval of the committee. It's an important project for our Beach Cities Watershed Management Group meeting its municipal stormwater permit goals. The next 2 projects, the first of the 2 is just an annual amount of money that we dedicate to improving our existing storm drain system. We have, failures of old CMP pipes. We have settling in some areas, and we'll develop bird baths along street gutters that residents don't like because of either smell or mosquitoes or things like that. And so we do small projects to try and improve the drainage in those locations. This frankly isn't nearly enough money compared to the amount of issues that we have for our very aged system, but there are just no real good dedicated funding sources for stormwater infrastructure right now. The second of the 2 is an ongoing project. EWIMP stands for Enhanced Watershed Management Program. That's our stormwater quality program. Overall, the Fulton Playfield is actually one of the projects in that EWIMP plan, but we have a number of other smaller activities that go on, either smaller project beginning, for instance, design or preliminary engineering on certain projects. We have some other duties that we categorize here, including we have to do stormwater quality monitoring, and so we pay for that out of this fund. So that's what those 3 items are. And Jesse, you'll have to help me with funding sources for these other 2. I think the drainage improvement, is that a 300 fund?
Correct. And then the EWIMP is combo of 300 capital funds and some Measure W.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. We'll talk about streets. Streets are really the bread and butter of where most of our funding goes to, at least in these recent years. We have a number of projects that have been programmed for a long time through our CR, a number of projects that were just added last year in the budget motion, or were talked about at least in the budget motion that were added this year. So the first of these is along Artesia Boulevard. We have a number of left turn improvements that are being looked at to improve safety. We've had a number of traffic collisions. Ringe comes to mind. Not all of these collisions, in fact, most of them are not as what were considered correctable, but the city wants to do what it can to improve sight lines and safety at those intersections. So we have a amount of money here that we'll have to do with modifying our left turn pockets to give them better visibility to oncoming traffic so we can avoid collisions at those intersections. We have traffic signal head replacement along Artesia Boulevard as well. This is just replacing the various signal heads that are out there, either for age or aesthetically. There's a lot of the old 8-inch lenses are outdated, need to be updated with the 12-inch lenses. So that's, again, a small amount of money. It's a start. We'll see how far we can go with that. The next item is Measure R local return money. The city council has a policy of putting, it's roughly 10%, I think, of that local return money towards bicycle transportation plan implementation, building out our bicycle network. So that as an annual amount, we at this time don't have anything earmarked for that. So when ideas come up in the future, we'll have a small amount of money, at least to get started on conceptual design and that kind of thing for that line item. Our citywide curb ramp project is an ongoing project where we mostly are funded by community block grant money. For this, there are limited things that money can be used for. One of them is ADA curb ramp improvements around the city. So every year we do 30 or 40 curb ramps typically to just continue to chip away at the inventory to bring all of our curb ramps up to the current standard. The next item is our slurry seal program. We've talked about that a little bit. This is our next phase. I guess it would be phase 2 or maybe phase 3 maybe coming up. I get lost on the phases, but somebody's keeping track. So we have that number, but we'll invest about $500,000 in that program again this year. New this year is a citywide striping program. This is for lane lines and center line striping. We have some striping capability in-house, but not this kind of striping. And so we have actually 2 on-call contracts that we're trying to get through the city council in the coming weeks to bring on vendors who can be available to us when we recognize needs for lane line and center line striping. And so this money will be set aside so that we can do that kind of maintenance. Citywide traffic signal upgrades. This is particularly along the Prospect Avenue corridor, similar to the Artesia Boulevard. Those are replacements for maybe technical reasons. These have more to do with aesthetically taking care of our traffic signal poles, painting them if we can. Some cases we'll just have to replace them because they're very old. So that's kind of a beginning seed money for a project to begin upgrading the traffic signals along Prospect. I think there's 3 major intersections we're targeting there. Continuing street programs, Dow Johnson traffic calming and the Vail Bikeway Avenue are projects all up in District 5. A number of the Dow Johnson traffic calming provisions are civil improvements, intersection enhancements, if you will, that have been approved by the city council as part of the traffic calming studies and review. We just haven't had funding to install those. And so this is money set aside to do that. And Vail Avenue is in the same neighborhood and they involve some civil improvements as well. So we're combining those into a single line item here. Traffic calming, Jesse, help me again here, that's general fund money, Fund 300 money?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where that will come from. The Vail Avenue Bikeway is probably qualified for certain types of active transportation grants. So when we get a little bit further on that project, we may be able to apply for some grant money to either supplement this or maybe replace this if we find a good program that we can get into at the right time. Green Streets has to do with stormwater quality again, and taking rainfall runoff that comes down the streets, and instead of putting it into the storm drain system and running it out to Dominguez Channel or the ocean, we try and infiltrate it or run it through rain gardens and that kind of thing to help with stormwater quality. We have a requirement in our EWIMP program to do this really all over the city. And so we put some money in our street program so that we can enhance, for instance, our Barrel Street project coming up. We have some deep wells, gravel wells, dry wells are called, where the first flush of runoff will go into those dry wells rather than into the storm drain system. And so the most polluted water gets infiltrated back into the ground rather than run out to the ocean. That's what this item is. Kingsdale Resurfacing. This is kind of our unofficial phase 3 to our transit center project. Phase 1 is the facility. Phase 2 is the improvements to Kingsdale north of Grant. And then this would be the final piece resurfacing Grant Avenue between Grant and 182nd Street. We also, Manhattan Beach Boulevard Street resurfacing. This is a project that's in design, so this would be supplemental money to an existing project, again, based on what our estimates were 3 years ago or so when this project was approved until what we're seeing now in the construction world. We just don't think we're going to have enough money, so we're identifying some additional funds here. Is this Prop C money, Jesse?
Yes, Prop C.
Prop C, okay. So Prop C is money from the county, also available on our transit streets, street security transit buses and facilities. Residential street rehab, we've talked about that program. This is our grind and overlay program, an annual allotment funded to that program that we spend periodically. We have one of those coming up that's in the $4 million range. So this would begin to set money aside for our next phase after this one coming up. Sidewalk improvements are always an issue, prevent liability, trip and fall kinds of issues. And we have an ongoing program for sidewalk improvements, funding proposed at $50,000 this year. Torrance Boulevard resurfacing, another project that's in the works already, but based on current pricing, we just don't think we have enough set aside. So this is an additional $1 million for that project. And then traffic calming, we've mentioned a couple of times here. This is an important program to the council to address through traffic, speeding, conflicts with pedestrians, that kind of thing. And so the council, some of these solutions are fairly simple, striping or crosswalks or LED stop signs. Other solutions are more expensive, have to do with civil work, curbs and gutters, medians, that kind of thing. And so there are some heavier costs for those. And we have a number of projects that have been approved. They've been through our traffic calming process with the Public Works Commission and the City Council. But we've only been able to do kind of the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, signage and striping and that kind of thing because of lack of funds. So we're continuing to fund that to be able to build out and implement the backlog of things that have been approved by the council.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, Andy. This transfer money includes the portion for the Riviera pedestrian.
Thank you, right. Yeah, the last council meeting, we presented some concepts. Council funded a study last year, $50,000 study for the Riviera Village for pedestrian mobility to make improvements to the pedestrian experience in the village. And we came up with some solutions and presented those to council, and they instructed us to move forward with a number of those implemented items. And so there's some funding available to do that in this line. Let's move on to the waterfront improvement. We have a number of new projects in the waterfront improvement. The International Boardwalk surface is old, kind of beat up asphalt. There's some work we need to do down there to resurface that. It'll be a little bit tricky. We won't get good economies on this one just because the machinery that we need to use is not standard. It's going to be smaller than a standard grind and overlay. We have a number of utilities there, so we're going to have to look at protecting those while we do the work. So we've got $500,000 proposed for that work. This second one is a new project idea. We've not had parking space counters in the Pier parking structure or security cameras there. So there's some interest in that project. We've earmarked $1.6 million in our proposal here for that. Moving forward, sea level rise, preparation, master planning. This is a project we've prepared reports required by the state to identify our vulnerabilities with sea level rise. And this is a continuation of that effort to identify first projects and get going on some of the preliminary planning and engineering things we'll need to do to address all of those vulnerabilities. A new project that's come out of the waterfront. I always want to say improvements. That's not the right word, Ted.
Amenities.
Amenities, thank you. Discussion has been a waterfront education center. So we've identified $75,000 here just to do some programming and pre-design work to get an idea of the cost to develop that center in a more complete way. And then the big ticket here on the waterfront is our pier parking structure. This is something we every couple of years, Ted mentioned before, we have a consultant on board who knows the facility well. They've identified a number of structural repairs. We also have some seismic upgrades that we need to do on the north pier parking structure. That money's included in here, and we want to get that done in this coming year. It involves some work in the area where the fun factory used to be, and since that space is vacant now, we want to capitalize on that and get that work done in the coming fiscal year. I think we have one other page on this for on the waterfront.
Yeah, I was going to add one thing, Andy, if I could.
Yeah, please do.
Just based off some of the comments from the commissioners in terms of discretionary funding and where a lot of their input can be come in handy is some of these projects, mostly our waterfront projects, are funded by enterprise funds in the tidelands and the uplands. This proposal, especially the larger ones of 1.6 and 4.3, are proposed coming from the unallocated general fund balance. So that's just so the commissioners are aware of where these proposals are coming from and those large dollar amounts.
Could I ask a quick question, Jesse? Since you said that, please. If you're working in the Tideland segment of the harbor, usually if it's a project over $250,000, you have to go to State Lands Commission for approval. Since we're using general fund monies rather than Tidelands monies, do you still have to go and get that approval?
I will defer to Andy or Ted on this one.
My understanding is yes, it's we do need to do that. Stephen Proud, our former director there, used to tell me yes. New director may have a different opinion, but I think the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Last page here on the waterfront improvement projects. These are existing projects. Harbor dredging has been funded at a design level up until this year. This year was programmed out to do additional dredging, $2.2 million. Frankly, I'm not sure that will be enough. This is the one we're waiting for the Army Corps to give us a permit. So we're not able to go to bid until we get those permit conditions and can write those into our specifications. We'll know better as soon as we get that done. So we're hoping to get that information soon. We have only about half the year where we're permitted to do this work between mid-January and mid-July every year. So we're hoping we can get this permit done and get it out to bid, sometime in the fall. So we're ready to go in the spring when the weather's good and we're able to work out there. The next item is an annual program. We put $200,000 into replacing pier piles and cross braces and utilities and other things on the pier that break frequently. We're looking at doing some deck board replacement. We have a number of timbers that are in pretty poor walking condition out on the Mont Pier, out near the end of the fishing pier area. So we'd like to replace those timbers as part of this upcoming year. We are doing a pier restroom project on the Mont Pier now, but we have the International Boardwalk restrooms that also need attention. So this money could be used there. There's also some talk about maybe trying to use some space in the Fun Factory to build new ADA compliant restrooms. That needs more discussion, but there's an idea there, at least for some preliminary work on that. Redondo Beach Marina parking lot pay stations. This is a project that Waterfront Department has identified as maybe a cost-saving measure by being able to eliminate in-person attendance and going to pay stations in the Redondo Beach Marina parking lot. The boat launch relocation, and also coming out of the waterfront amenities discussion, this would not nearly be enough to relocate it, but maybe to get design going for a relocation of the boat launch. And then a $10 million grant, and Jesse, you'll have to tell them more about the source of this, but state grant awarded to the city identified improvements for Seaside Lagoon.
Yeah, I believe it's from the Department of Boating and Waterways.
And Jesse, before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to point out one thing. Andy mentioned earlier, and Jesse, you talked about it. Out of that $20 million, half of it, first of all, comes from the state grant that comes to Seaside Lagoon. So that $20 million that has the asterisk next to it is subject to funding availability. There are components that have guaranteed money, such as the Seaside Lagoon, $10 million. The other, which is on the prior slide, about $6 million go to the Pier parking structure. One of them is for the critical repairs, and the other is for the security and cameras out there. The Pier parking structure critical repairs is actually something that we started. It was about that time for us to go make the next assessment of the Pier parking structure. And I think during COVID, we weren't having, obviously the Fun Factory itself was shut down, but there wasn't a whole lot of activity that was occurring at the pier. And if you all remember, last year we had the incident down in Florida where these buildings collapsed, and they started to look at them and determined whether those structures were seismically fit or not. So that was the opportunity that we took with Walker Parking and Walker Structural to actually go look at our pier parking structures beyond the incidental repairs, but we also wanted them to look at the seismic retrofit component of those structures. And they've actually identified some seismic retrofits that would be necessary in that pier parking structure, the North Pier parking structure, where those improvements will all be occurring inside of the Fun Factory. The fact that it's a non-operating business right now is really opportunistic, and the fact that those improvements would be conducted there to really stabilize the structure even further, and not stabilize it from an unstable method. It's more to bring it to more current standards, identify some of those potential things that may come up, and retrofit the structure correctly. So that's all I wanted to point out, that's almost $16 million out of that $20 million are going towards the pier parking structure and the Seaside Lagoon monies.
Commissioner Conroy, I see you have your hand up. Have a question
Yeah.
now, or should we wait till the presentation's finished?
Well, no, if you could go back to that last slide, please. Yes, that one, the additional funding for existing projects. So I'm interpreting that to mean that these are additional funds required to complete existing projects. Is that accurate?
Correct.
That's
Okay.
both, because Andy mentioned the pier deck and piling structure repairs. That's an annual funding amount that we put towards that, so we can continue the maintenance of the pier itself and some of the pilings and the decking that's out there, so that we're not having to react to them as emergency work.
Okay. What I'm trying to figure out is this additional funds required that were not previously budgeted?
These are all new appropriations, yes.
Okay. So if that's the case, and this is all on existing projects, I would find it really helpful if we could see what was the original or last total appropriated funds budget for these existing projects, and then we're adding 20 million to it, and then what the new total budget is. That way we could see whether it's a 10% increase or an 80% increase on the budget that was already approved. I assume that information is available. Anyway,
Mr. Conroy, let me help with that, because I think we're mixing apples and oranges a little bit.
Okay.
Harbor dredging construction, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, we had the money for the design, but we didn't actually appropriate the funding for the construction. So this 2.2 million is actually new money on an existing project that did not have its construction funding. So it's actually new monies and a new phase of the project that was not because we needed additional funding from a prior construction phase that was there. The pier deck piling structure repairs, again, that's an annual allotment that we do.
Okay.
The council is supportive of improving all the restrooms. They gave us a tranche of money last year. One project is in full reconstruction. That's out on the Mondstadt Pier. The others are retrofits that our staff is doing, and we're looking to do more. We talked about the potential of constructing new restrooms within some of the space of the old Fun Factory. If some of you have been aware, the restrooms behind Quality Seafood, they're there. We've done some retrofits to them, but because of the way that they are structurally sort of nestled, we're unable to bring them to current ADA standards. So that 50,000 may be helpful to essentially create a new project that would be the new ADA compliant restrooms within the area. The parking stations, it's brand new. Relocation of the boat launch, that's brand new in its assessment. And then obviously Seaside Lagoon is brand new funding. So, and even the pier parking structure, those that you asked a question earlier about the slurry seal, these are ongoing improvements where every couple of years, the council will give us a tranche of money to do the improvements. They'll allocate that with an assessment and the next phase of those improvements. So it's multi-million dollars worth of improvements that are there.
Right.
They're all phased-in improvements.
Okay, so Ted, what I'm understanding you're saying is that City Council is approving tranches or certain elements of the full project, like maybe the design phase of it, or what we're going to spend in the next fiscal year. But do we ever look at what the total project cost is? Because I would hate to just keep spending, whether it's 2.2 million or 10 million or $250,000 a year with no end in sight. It seems to me like at some point we need to look at what the total cost of the harbor dredging construction project is, what the total cost of the Seaside Lagoon project is. Does that happen?
It does happen.
I was going to say our 5-year CIP model usually identifies full funding for a project phased out over the years. So that's one place to go look for it. And certainly looking back at the history, we calculate.
Okay.
And I'll use 2 other examples. The pier parking structure, when we had the assessment completed, Walker, they gave us, the phased approach, if you will, and then the overall construction cost or reconstruction cost of all those improvements. It's that level of an analysis or study that's taken to the City Council for their input, and we receive direction from the council. How do you want us to approach this? And the phased approach is in line with the direction that the council gave us. The road surfacing, which Andy mentioned, we do every 3 years. Our pavement assessment engineers are actually assessing that roadway, giving us an overall cost of what it would take to actually resurface all those roadways. Obviously, they're going to give us a cost in the $20 to $30 million range. When we go with a recommended list of improvements, when we started this process, we went and really got direction from the City Council. How do you want us to proceed with this? And they gave us the 10-year plan, and we're essentially implementing that 10-year plan. So this phasing approach is in line with the council's directive on how they'd like to see us implement these improvements.
Commissioner Conroy, I want to jump out of turn and second what you're saying. I've seen this happen in real life where you have 1.5 million and the next year it's 3.1 and then it's 750 and it's 2.4. And at the end of this day, the numbers are notional, but you get where I'm going. At the end of the day, someone such as yourself, Commissioner, says, can you give me the total? And they said it's 9.4. And everybody in the room says, I would never have approved that. So we don't question whether this approach of working things as the projects continue is useful. I think what some of the commissioners are asking is, why is it being presented to us this way? And what are you asking us to make of the information?
And if I may jump in at this point, Commissioner Johnson, I too have to support what Commissioner Conroy is saying. And just for an example of precisely what Commissioner Johnson was talking about, in this current budget request, I believe it was back one level, you said that additional funding for critical pier improvements is $4.5 million or $4.3 million. I'm sorry, it is a new project. Okay, but in the 5-year plan, and I find it hard to believe that as of a year ago, we didn't have any idea that we would have to do seismic retrofits. It said that critical repairs was going to be $185,000 this year. And if looking once again in the 5-year CIP on page 41, it says this total project out to 24-25 is a little over $2.5 million. So I think what we're saying is we're getting surprises, and part of the reason we believe we're getting surprises is because of the way the material is being presented. We can't tell what's new, what's an add-on, what's needed, what's being readjusted, what's been spent, how it's been spent. We have no idea. It just doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
May I suggest we continue with the presentation?
Sure. I'll put my hand down.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. back here to just the last couple of categories. Our park improvements category, Dominguez Park Play project was projected at a budget level of $1.7 million back in 2017, maybe 18. We had COVID. We had actually a change of leadership in our services, community services department there. So this project sat for maybe 2 years without a lot of progress on it. COVID impacted it just because we were trying to get public input into the project itself. And, when COVID hit, we weren't sure quite how to do that. So it took a little while for us to get there, but new estimate made this year, kind of dusting off the project. We just realized we need more money, and that has to do with cost escalation, construction costs, material costs, et cetera. The scope there has changed a little bit to add some fencing and that kind of thing, but generally that's the reason for that request. And Jesse, help me on this funding source for that one. Is that Quimby?
Yeah, Dominguez Park is Quimby.
Yeah, okay. And then the skate park improvement project, this is some additional work at the Perry site. The project that the council approved was installed. There were some things that weren't working so well with some of the other activities in the vicinity. And so after some community input, the council decided to make some modifications to their previously approved design. So this $30,000 is to make those improvements to kind of separate uses a little bit better, provide for some protection between kids using the small playground area and the skaters. So those are those two line items.
Thank you, Andy. I'll jump on this particular slide. On the facility improvement projects, these are all new projects, essentially. 200 North PCH, that's our detective bureau for the police department. It's across the street. It's partly part of the school district property. And the electrical meter that services that building is actually a single meter at the gymnasium for the school. We have been in conversations with the school district. We need to separate the electrical usage for that. And that 100,000 is to engage an electrical engineer and to implement the separation of that service so that we have our own meter and then are able to pay our own direct costs rather than a split cost with the school district. The fire department and station one window replacement, it's just the storefront type window improvements and replacement. Those windows there have aged, and with the new windows, we'll be able to get them better coverage, better protection from the elements, and that would be just a retrofit of the existing building. Fire station and city hall parking lot security design. We're looking to harden up the security around our facilities. Just a few weeks ago, we had somebody actually come in and vandalize city vehicles that were parked overnight at City Hall. And then the police department Pier substation refurbishment, that's our offices for the police department on the Pier. That is a building that needs significant amount of improvements, mostly tenant improvements from the inside. So we'll be retrofitting the entire interior of the structure, but we'll also be doing some significant improvements to the exterior to also highlight the fact that this is a police substation and our police department has made a commitment to actually occupy that facility and show a lot more police presence in the Pier, and would like to see that improvement being done. That's the 250,000 there. Jesse, next slide.
I think these are mine, Ted, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this is the category of additional funding to existing project. And just to be clear, City Park Facility Parking Lot is kind of an ongoing program. It's a placeholder program. The council funds it with a certain amount of money each year. It's actually the second year. That last year was the first. And so we're recommending $50,000 allocation to this program, and we've identified Dominguez Park parking lot as the recipient of that work. So that's, you'll see maybe this number next year with another different amount in it, and that will continually grow. To your discussion earlier, this is a hard one to say it costs so much the first time we talked about, and now it costs this much because it's an ongoing program, much as kind of a fund that you would put forward towards this type of work. Parking lots don't have a lot of outside funding sources. So Jesse, I think this one was 300 fund money, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then Civic Center Safety and Workplace, again, another program like that has an annual funded amount. This has to do with improvements at City Hall, police station, other city facilities to make repairs as needed, painting, AC, carpets, whatever. So this is an annual amount to make mostly tenant improvement kind of improvements at our existing facilities. Health improvements,
that's a typo.
That's part of the previous title. Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Okay. The next one is the police department shooting range. The concept that the city council has asked us to move forward with is a modular pre-manufactured building set into the footprint of the existing shooting range. We have money funded for design, and that process is just about to get underway. We are setting money aside here to begin the construction funding. Our CIP 5-year model, I think, has $750,000 this year and about that much next year to complete it. Again, this is one of the items where our modular building prices have gone up 20% since we first quoted it. We'll know better in a year or so when we get the design done and we get new quotes, how close we are to that one. Police station improvements. This is kind of an annual funded maintenance type improvements at the current police station facility. Jesse, do you know if they have specific projects in mind yet for this one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just office work that needs to be done.
Okay. Yeah, so we did some locker rooms and other improvements in the last couple of years, and we're just continuing to fund that so we can. And a lot of this is just because our facilities are old and there's not funding available to make the major reconstruction efforts that would take. So we approach it this way with money set aside for maintenance items and kind of room by room improvements as we can. RBTV broadcast. This is PEG fees, which are sequestered only for this use for TV broadcasting through cable and the facilities that provide that. So we've used this money in the past to upgrade the city council chambers to both technically and the architecture, tenant improvements inside. And so this money will probably sit until there's a great need for it, and we'll put it towards a new project for improvements in those facilities. Again, a similar one is the Transit Fleet Operations Center. This is money that's coming from Prop C, I believe, Jesse. And
SB1, good repair.
Okay, this is SB1, State of Good Repair. So this is a calculated amount that is allotted to our city non-competitively. We set it in a fund to make improvements to the Operations Center, which is the building that's on the Transit Center site that exists for bus maintenance, fleet maintenance, and also their dispatch center. Veterans Park Historic Library improvements. I believe we had some money set aside for this last year. We've done some kind of early price for window replacement and roof repairs and elevator repairs. Realized we probably need some more money. We haven't begun design on those yet, but we're getting started on those. And so we're just asking for more money to be set aside to bring that building up to a good serviceable condition. And then the EV charging structure infrastructure project. We finished a project last year, about $375,000 project. Actually, Jesse was in charge of that one. And there's been discussion about needing more EV charging infrastructure. And so an amount has been set aside here to just kind of seed that project and keep that momentum going, looking for new sites and projects that we can do. There is grant money available for some of this infrastructure. But there's also city costs as well for installing electrical and signaling equipment stuff to make those whole systems work. So I think that concludes all of our slides.
We have one more.
Oh, one more? Okay.
Yep.
Oh.
So this is one, it's a new CIP project. It's the permanent sign replacement. We have the city entry marker monuments on the surrounds of the city. There are some that are even on the interior of the city. We brought this forward because in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of those markers knocked down by drivers under the influence. We need to get them replaced. They are beyond the ability for us to replace them on an O&M perspective. So we're asking the council to authorize that 100,000. We have two other markers that need to be replaced, and I think we were getting prices in the $18,000 to $25,000 range per each of these units for that replacement. So that's this, and we call it, it's funded through the self-insurance fund, because a lot of times when we're ready to do the implementation, we need the funds up front. But if we have a police report, we have drivers identified, insurance identified, the city will put a claim against that insurance and the driver in order to recover those costs. But that doesn't come in the same fiscal year. That comes a year or two, sometimes later. So the self-insurance fund will fund the implementation up front, and then when the reimbursement comes back, it replenishes those funds in that same manner. The next slide. So this sort of concludes our presentation for you tonight. We are, again, asking for you to not only receive and file the presentation, but we are asking for your input. We've received a lot of great input. We'd be happy to receive anything more. Trust me, as engineers, there's nothing that we'd like to do other than to see a project get designed and constructed in its totality and its completeness. Unfortunately, with the funding that's available and the level of improvements that are necessary, a lot of times those are projects that wind up being phased rather than implemented in their entirety. As Andy mentioned, a lot of our facilities, we talked about the police station and the fire station and City Hall, they're old facilities. There was talk about constructing brand new facilities and in the $30, $40, $50 million mark. At this particular point, that's not available to us, but what we also have are existing facilities that we need to continuously retrofit and upgrade and just maintain. And that's where we're asking for that monies to come from. So with that concludes our presentation. We're available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioner Wenham, you have your hand up. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, Ted, a question on total expenditures. Just to give it, I think it'd be helpful to give us an idea. Could you tell us what we spent, what the capital improvements, actual expenditures out of the general fund for FY21, what you're expecting to spend this year and what you're asking to spend next year?
And I'm going to ask Jesse for a little bit of assistance on this one. What we're asking for next year is essentially the projects that we've identified to be funded by the 300. And Jesse, I know you had the matrix that sort of identified some of those funds. Could you help with what those values are that we projected?
Can I get
the Fund 300 monies, the discretionary funds
for next year?
Correct.
I mean, I could, let me pull this up.
I mean, this question is intended to get back at the point a couple of other commissioners have raised. Right now, I have no idea whether we're talking a 2% increase or a 32% increase. So that's the purpose of the question. And I think that's where we need to start before we can comment on individual projects. Is the total package doable? We don't know that yet because we've not looked at city revenue forecasts, but that's the kind of a presentation figure that is absolutely essential in this discussion, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, I can tell you that costs for us recently, what we've looked at is 30% increases in construction costs across the board. That would be for both material and labor. That's significantly higher than we would have ever expected in the past. Can we make the same prediction as far as next year and the year after? We know it's going to taper off, but are we going to see those same numbers? Right now, we're making projections based on what we do know today and anticipate in line with the increases that we've seen recently.
Yeah, and that reality is what hits you in the face when we're talking about budgeting, because if we've got a $100 million city budget, then that revenue is not going to increase by 30%. So that's where we have to start making cuts at some point. So the first question again is, what do we spend in FY21? What are we going to spend in FY22? And what is requested at this point for FY23?
And Jesse, if we're unable to bring that up at this point, we can always come back and follow up with you, Commissioner. Let you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah.
We'll have to, I'll have to bring back, I don't have the expenditures from I know what our expenditures are so far for the current fiscal year. But in terms of the general fund and by fund, I have it by project. So I don't think it'd be useful information. What I did, what I'm sharing right now is kind of the spreadsheet that we kind of utilize that goes over all those projects we went over and shows them by fund type, as you see on the top column.
I don't think you're sharing that.
Yeah, you're not sharing anything.
Oh, you guys aren't seeing this? Okay.
No, we're seeing the presentation that was there. You just gave.
Let me try and.
Yeah, Jesse, rather than to make something that doesn't answer the question, if you want to take time to do this, that's perfectly understandable. But if you can get that information to us, that's one of the places, as far as I'm concerned, we have to start.
Okay, we'll do that. And Jesse, I think you do need to stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, let me hit the stop share. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to share something there, Jesse, or
I think based off of the comment from the commissioner, I'm no longer going to share unless it's.
Okay, so I guess Commissioner Solomon, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair Simpson. This is a little bit more about process, Ted, than anything else. With some of these capital improvement projects, we've got our ordinance, everything over 15,000 is a capital improvement project. We're talking about, in part, mission creep, but also simple inflation and other economic pressures that cause increases in the cost of these projects just because of the processes that we go through in order to get them approved. So we're going to be reviewing our charter soon, or that seems to be the direction where the council is going. Do you all, in your internal discussions, and something that maybe you'd be willing to share here, have an idea of where you see kind of a break point where if we could do a project for $50,000, as an example, there was one listed on there for $50,000. It'd be a lot simpler and we'd probably save a lot of these unknown cost increases for delaying projects that are going to go on for a year, 18 months that we could otherwise complete. Do you have an idea in your mind of saying an ideal thing for us would be $35,000, $50,000, $100,000, what would improve your processes so that we wouldn't see some of this leakage on the backside for smaller projects dramatically increasing in cost when materials go up?
Thank you, Commissioner Solomon, and I'll probably turn to Andy for some assistance on this. I think we came to you as a commission 2-3 years ago and we talked about that. And, you know, when the council has identified this as a strategic priority for them to have a charter committee look at that charter, we are first in line to make recommendations to the purchasing authority limits. I think when we presented it previously, we talked about the public contracting code for the state and what those values are set. We're making a recommendation for consideration when that committee eventually comes together to tie it, not necessarily because we are a charter city, we don't necessarily need to ascribe to it, but we can make reference to that particular section of the contracting code. And I don't remember the values, and Andy, you can help me with that. They are significantly higher than they are for the city. A lot of these projects can be implemented at a much more efficient manner and much speedier manner than the process that we have to go through today. But Andy, if you want to talk about what current limiting factors are, the current equivalent values are from a state perspective.
Yeah, last time I checked, I think it was about 45,000 or so for kind of the first, our 15,000 equivalent right now. And then our 50,000 equivalent is more like 175,000 or 178, somewhere in there. It may have changed since I last looked, but we did talk about this actually at the Public Works Commission at our last month's meeting in terms of project delivery and our efficiencies and our inefficiencies and discussion about how to improve that process. And this was one of the things that the commission recommended, that when the charter committee is put together, they'd like to be able to have some input into that process, the public works type purchasing. I will say that you can't really do much even for $50,000 these days. We do a lot of work on the maintenance side, maybe with that, but from the engineering capital point of view, there's not a lot we do. We don't try and, for instance, the project for the electric vehicle charging station, that was partly grant funded, $375,000. That was a project that we ran out of our operations side because it just didn't rise to the level. We did need some engineering, and I helped get an engineering consultant on board to provide, and we did some design review. But in terms of project management, actually Jesse handled that when he was working for the operations side because he was familiar with the grant money that was available for the charging stations themselves. And so, I would say a real number about when it takes best advantage of the engineering division, and at least what we do on the capital improvement side is probably in the couple of $100,000 range. 175 seems even low. 50,000 seems very low in terms of that. One other thing for the, if a charter committee is formed, and just for your information, is purchasing authority. In other cities I've been in, the city manager has a certain amount of purchasing authority, which saves us a trip to the city council, which involves quite a bit of staff work to put a report together and that kind of thing. That might be something that could be looked at for certain levels of contracts could be signed by or authorized by the city manager. Our charter allows us to not go through the bidding process for maintenance and repair projects. Those aren't very well defined in our charter. They're better defined in the state, and so we kind of defer to the state contract code. But we get into arm wrestling matches with our city attorney's office about, is this a maintenance contract or is this a capital improvements project? Be great to get some better definition on that kind of thing to help us negotiate that and take advantage of, a simple repair like the Morrell House roof repair. The easiest way to do that, and also I think a way that protects the public interest, is getting quotes. Do you really need design and specification? Maybe some, but probably not full on effort because we know what the roof looks like. We know what the materials are. We just need to get somebody to come in and do it. And so is that maintenance or is that capital improvement? That's the argument. So maybe some definition on that. The state has some definition on, roadway surfaces less than an inch, for instance, are considered maintenance. Greater than an inch are considered capital. Painting a whole building is capital. Painting part of a building is maintenance. So it gets a little bit gray on how to decipher. But those would be some things I think that would help in terms of our process, bringing some clarity to, how we could contract more efficiently.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds, but I think in the greater context of the conversation, twofold. One is certainly the Mission Creek component that some of the commissioners raised, but the other part of it being the simple difficulty of being slogging through the mud for a project that might otherwise be something we don't have to fight about for maintenance, or worry about that designation that we had a number in mind that we could start using and indexing to improve our efficiencies and perhaps a leakage on increased costs during the period of time which it takes to get a CIP approved.
Yeah, that's a good thought. That escalation number is, typically 4 to 5% a year. Over COVID, there was a vertical line in that curve of about 15 or 20% in some industries, including construction. And so, anything that we can shorten timelines on adds savings, or I guess it eliminates overruns.
It's not as if we're eliminating our due diligence. We're still getting bids, but we're improving our efficiency.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the explanation.
So Commissioner Min, you have your hand up.
No, thank you for the presentation. And we've talked about many of these projects in the Public Works Commission before, and it's kind of nice to see some of them moving forward next fiscal year. One of the things that I brought up multiple times in the commission is, it seems like there's a revenue issue, right? For the program, we have more projects that we want to do than we have money to do. And in my day job, I spend a lot of time going after grants. And I know we've discussed grants a few times here in this meeting. And we've also discussed the administrative burden of having grants and then having to spend the monies on certain schedules with certain strings tied to them. And the bike lane project you mentioned multiple times tonight being a good example of that, having to go through a lot of bureaucratic processes to just get some bike lane money approved. Right? It should be easy, but it isn't. But nonetheless, it's free money, even if there's local matches involved. And, in my experience, it usually it requires the city to spend a little money to get a lot of money when it comes to grants, right? You got to put together a plan, you got to put together a strategy, project specs and data and all that stuff to essentially do a PSR or PSRE, right, to submit for a grant application. But it's worth it. I mean, it's could be 100 to 200 times what you spend in return to fund these projects, right? And also, it helps move things a little faster because you're under the pressure of the grantor to get things moving, and you can sometimes use the grant to pay for additional staff or consultant staff, right, to help you do the projects faster. And so I know we've discussed kind of briefly here and throughout the meeting that, we would look at certain grants that may be out there to fund some of these projects, but it doesn't seem like we have a very strategic plan on how to do that. And I'm wondering if it may make sense as part of your budget request, just to set aside a small amount of funding, maybe 50 grand or something like that, to actually put that together for like a 5 to 10 year period, especially given the infrastructure bill that was passed by the feds, right? There's literally $1 trillion in funding available at the federal level. There's a multi-billion-dollar surplus at the state level. And if the economy improves, there's going to be a lot of revenues through sales taxes for the county level. So it seems like we should just prepare for that as a city, and kind of like, I know the administrative burden is not a small thing to deal with. I understand that from my experiences, but it's still worth it, I think. To get tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of these grants are not even, some of them are by formula and allocation, but some of them are competitive. I mean, a small city like ours could compete for a very large multi-million-dollar grant and receive it, right? So I guess my recommendation would be to find a way to create some kind of strategic plan on seeking grant funds from the feds and state, county levels for a multitude of different kinds of funds, whether it be streets or parks or housing or stormwater capture, right? This Measure W now, right, at the county level. And a part of that plan has to include the support that you need to administer those grants, which I know with your current support levels, there's probably no way you could do that. But, if the grants have a way to help you hire consultant staff or full-time staff to do that, or even part-time or temporary staff to help you manage all that, would probably make it all feasible, right? More digestible, so you don't have to go to sleep having to deal with Caltrans every night, So that's my sincere recommendation. And I think a city like ours could do that if we spend a little money just putting a plan together to do that.
And Commissioner Rind, if I can, I was coming through the strategic plan itself because I know it is a priority for our city manager, and he's already got a work in progress to bring a grant writer, a firm that actually can sift through a lot of the grant opportunities that come out there so that they can help us. And like you mentioned, if we are to receive any of those grants, absolutely, as part of that funding, it will help with design consultants and or analytical consultants to do all the prep work that's necessary.
Yeah.
These big components. I didn't find it as I thumbed through the strategic plan. I didn't find that as a strategic priority. It doesn't mean that it's not there. I just didn't see it that quickly. But I do know it's on the radar and the priority for our city manager to try to bring a firm on board in order to help out with that.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. I would friendly push to accelerate that process would probably work miracles.
Yeah, we're on the same side of the table on that one. We don't have staff to do it. We get asked to look at 3 or 4 items on the strategic plan this spring have been come back with grant opportunities, and we have to dig in and do a bunch of research in an area that we're not that familiar with in some cases. And so, yeah, having an expert on board would be very helpful. It's certainly something we're promoting internally to our management. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Garcia, I see that you're here now. So note that he's joined us. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about being late at the beginning. Yeah, I was like 15 minutes late. But yeah, I think what the other commissioners are looking for, and I think Jesse also said it, is that he has the individual project sheets that would have the history of the funding. And I know that's a lot of detail, but it sounds like they want, I know in the back of budgets, they'll have that, you know, and you guys probably already have it. And I know what you guys did for this presentation, basically migrated all those individual costs into these lump sum categories, you know, based on funds. And so I don't know if that would be helpful to send people that the 121 projects or whatever you have in the CIP as well. But it seems to be, you know, the other commissioners seem to be asking those kind of details. And so I'm not sure if that would solve that issue. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents. But I thought the presentation was very good, and I like the balance in the numbers and all that. So I'm pretty happy with it. So that's all I have.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Samples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think with the last comment, if I can clarify where I stand, and I don't know if the other commissioners feel this way about it, but I understand project cost creep. I get that. I think what I'm looking for, what I'm asking for, I don't care about all the sources of funding. I mean, my most important number is what comes out of the general fund. The other grant funds and things like that, that's fluff, okay? What I'm concerned is that when you have a project, it doesn't appear to have a clear endpoint or a clear budget. Instead, it's kind of tracked along in little incremental pieces. We have no idea what's been spent in order to get to any ultimate conclusion. So if the project isn't being tracked financially and being disclosed in a clear fashion, we don't have any idea what we're spending money on. So things like the Pier, for instance, that I brought up earlier, it goes from $1 million project to a $4.5 million project in 1 year. It would be nice to have a statement that says, we've spent this much and we learned this, so the new number is that. That's the kind of thing I think I'm looking for, and I hope that helps. And if that is kind of what the other commissioners are talking about, I would appreciate the support. Otherwise, you can just ignore my comment. Thank you.
Commissioner Samples, let me help with that a little bit, because I understand what you're asking for. And I guess what I'm trying to also say is that there aren't projects in design and construction creep that we want to see moving forward. And I'm going to go back to the Pier parking structure that you mentioned. That's a project that 6 years ago was presented to the city council. There were an updated assessment of the Pier parking structures, what their needs were. And they identified at that point what are some of the 3-year improvements that are recommended, the 70 or 10-year improvements that are recommended, and 15-year, and I believe a full reconstruction of it. At that time, the council's directive was to look at the 5 to 7 year implementation plan. Mm-hmm. That was done. I think we've spent, and Lauren can correct me, over $4 million in those level of improvements. And they were $1 million project at a time. And because we had a great contractor, we had the design of the next phase. Out of that 5 to 7 year plan, we were essentially implementing what the recommendations of Walker's assessment was to the city council, and we were implementing that in that way as funds became available. Every one of those every one of those improvements was about $1 million a year. The seismic fit was something that was identified to be done, but was not actually done in the early stages. What brought this to light even further was, again, what occurred last year in Florida, and we were ready to do the updated assessment. We asked Walker to make sure that they incorporate the seismic retrofit as a component of this assessment and identify what that improvement cost is going to be. And that's essentially what we've received. We haven't even presented that assessment to the city council. That's yet to come to the city council. We're giving you a heads up of what we're proposing, and that will be coming to the council for that discussion And again, and not piecemealing it, we're going to identify what those level of improvements are and get that sense of direction from the city council. And this approximately $4.4 million, the majority of that was a seismic retrofit component that was recommended.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the comment. I guess the only thing I can circle back to is we've spent a lot of time here, and you've done you've provided an excellent presentation, but it's sketchy information, and I'm not sure what we're meant to do with it other than receive and file, because it sounds like ultimately all of this goes to the city council, and it follows a long plan that you have with city council, and we're not privy to any of that background information. So it's a little frustrating sitting here this long.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
I was going to just, it's a very interesting report and quite detailed. I would have liked to have seen some comparative figures that I don't think we saw in the past, but I'm not quite sure when we're done and said what you're expecting us to do with this tonight.
I think what we're asking is, are you supportive of these projects that we've identified? Are there projects that you see as commissioners talking to the constituents, to the residents of the city, to the city council, you as an individual, that were not noted here, that were not identified here, that you'd like to see become a component to be recommended to the city council for consideration? That's the kind of input that we're looking for from you. And if it's supporting the projects as we've identified them, receive and file, that would be great. But we've given us a lot of great input, and I think a lot of the comments that you've given us tonight are going to help us improve this presentation to the city council that may help address a lot of the questions that you asked us tonight as well.
Commissioner Whittam.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. First, Mel, you asked for support for your point of view, and I think we all agree with what you're saying. What I'm thinking of in the way of data to support this, Ted, is what if I'm not trying to tell you your job, but if I were in a job similar to this, I'd want to see a matrix. If we've got 116 projects, I'd want to see a matrix of 115 rows with this sort of information: beginning cost estimate, current cost estimate, what we've spent so far, what we're planning to spend next year, and what we're going to spend in the next 5 years or the next 3 years. That's sort of basic math along these lines. And I don't think you can't manage you guys have an insurmountable job as far as I'm concerned. Some of these projects are basically annual maintenance. Street work is to a certain degree annual maintenance. It's not a capital improvement, it's maintenance. And if we're spending $200,000 or $300,000 a year on those projects, that's going to go on forever. There are other things like the shooting range, as an example. That's a project that we can very definitely say, this is a cost at the beginning. If that doubles, then we need to know why in the hell it doubled. So it's simply a management tool as far as I'm concerned. And the information I mentioned a moment ago, those three figures, I can't give you much help on individual projects because everything you've talked about seems to me to be something we want to do, we need to do. But there is going to be a limit based upon the budget. And you may well come up with $30 or $40 million, and there may only be $25 million. That remains to be seen. So to your request of comments on individual projects, I think everything you talked about is a worthwhile project, but we're going to come up very quickly to the reality that we don't have money to spend. We can't afford all those projects. So we're going to have to start making some decisions. And that's what happens from this point on, I suppose.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodham.
Commissioner Solomon, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair Simpson. To answer your question, Ted, I'd say, well, I saw things for a lot of parks. I didn't see anything in Wilderness Park. I don't know if that's something that we've been wrapping up projects there or the projects that are on hold there. With regard to the meter split over at the location adjacent to the high school, The $100,000, are we estimating that we're going to recapture in savings how much we're paying to the school district over that? Is this something that the school district asked us to do? How did that come about?
It actually came about, it preceded me and Andy and all of us here today. When the city and the school district worked out this lease, if you will, or the use of facility for the city, as part of that agreement, that was one of the recommendations to be done, was to split the meter. Over the years, the city and the school district were amenable, I guess, to paying they split the cost of whatever the energy uses were. COVID brought that into light a little bit differently. So now with the current situation, they are asking for us in order to identify it. I think it's only fair to the school district and it's only fair to the city that we actually go through the implementation. As we saw that as a requirement of the original agreement between the city and the school district, we felt it's the right time in order for us to do that. Mike Klein, who just piped in, has actually been engaged with both the school district and an electrical engineer in Southern California, Edison. So we've got a pretty good idea of where and how we're able to split the power itself so that the school district will only realize consumption used on their facilities through their meter, and then we'll be able to make that division for the city's use on ours. But I think at this point, it's an amenable situation for both the district and the city, and it's something that we as two public agencies agreed to do years ago when that agreement occurred.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ted. As far as the pay stations at the marina, has there been a cost-benefit analysis created between the pay station and having the staffing for the booth down there? Because when we go through the harbor amenities and we put in a boat ramp down there, that's the way that it ends up going, and it's over there, whether it be a Mole D or Mole C plus or Mole Joe's Crab Shack or wherever it ends up being. Does that end up becoming a pyramid that's just there and we reinstall a live person? I was just curious about the cost benefit analysis of installing pay stations versus a person, and then how it's worked out over at the other part of the pier parking structure there adjacent to the boardwalk, if we're looking at that as a model of success and saying that's why we're moving forward here.
I don't recall the cost benefit analysis component of it. Andy, I don't know if you remember that from earlier conversations.
Yeah, this came out of Waterfront and Economic Development Department. Jesse, did they have that on their sheet, their long form?
I did not see that component in the.
So I guess we're taking them at face value that it's been successful at the pier parking structure and they want to implement it there. Certainly could be done, could be recommended to be done.
So that came, it wasn't a council policy thing where they were looking at it. It was maybe Stephen in reviewing the success of previous Director Proud in reviewing the success.
Yeah, I'm not at all the meetings, so I can't say for certain, but my understanding was it was a cost saving initiative. And they, machines are available. We're doing a little bit of engineering just to make sure we get ADA compliance as we need to and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's I guess the role of the Waterfront Economic Development would be to justify the economics of the.
Okay, well, automation is always good. Typically automation in the long run is going to save you money.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll ask is with regard to the $250,000 for the boat ramp, is that to study placement as in connection with the harbor amenities, or was that for a different purpose?
Do we need to study placement again? Or?
Thanks, Andy.
You know, my understanding was that the waterfront amenities discussion was going to pick a mole, if you will, not whack-a-mole, but pick a mole, and we would proceed with some preliminary design at an identified location.
And that's what the 250 was for.
Yeah, and I used to be in the waterfront engineering business, and so that's sufficient to design a ramp. It may not be enough for if they get into tidal studies and, wave height and all that kind of stuff, it may not be enough, but I'm not sure that that's what's going to make the decision about where it goes. I think it's more of a political decision than a technical decision, if you don't know what I'm saying. But so I don't know that all of the typical things would be needed from a technical or required, at least for the city's satisfaction for the design. But I think 250 should cover, the vast portion of design on that project.
Okay, thanks. And Ted, I'm sorry, I didn't let you answer about Wilderness Park. Is there something that's pending down there or nothing really pending right now?
No, nothing. I know there's funding that's available now, and the council has given us directives to not only look at potential improvements to the upper pond, but initiate some of the assessments for the lower pond. That's already funded. That was not looking for anything further at this particular point.
Okay, yeah, I could add, at Wilderness Park this weekend in the lower pond there wasn't any work going on down there. So.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah, Commissioner Solomon, if I could add, you didn't see it on the list. It's a carryover item. We didn't carry over projects, which would, that's where we get the 121 projects we have on our list. So there is money for both the Wilderness Park improvements and the pond refurbishment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jesse. Thank you, Commissioners.
Commissioner Woodham?
Yeah, Ted, quick question. Just a curious question. You showed that we had some charging stations that have been completed. How many charging stations has the city built, and how are those accessed by the public? By credit card? Are they free? What's the deal?
Jesse, you're smiling. You're ready to answer that question, so go ahead.
Yeah. So we've installed 9 dual port stations throughout the city, and in different parts of the city, we have 3 up in Performing Arts Center, including the DC fast charger, the only one in the city, and then we have 1 in Riviera Village, a couple in front of the police department parking lots, 1 each in our libraries. Are
they all the ChargePoint network?
And they're all ChargePoint network. So you have a ChargePoint account, access it with a credit card, and the account that you set up through ChargePoint.
If I can ask a question about those, if you don't mind. Hermosa Beach has free electric charging stations. And I'm just where the decision was made here to have them actually be charged, and how the rate was set.
I think the Hermosa does have free charging. They've had some of these stations for a long time. And I think that really comes from the initial effort from different cities who were kind of early adopters to install these stations, make them free, just to get people, the ability to be able to charge and buy electric vehicles where it made sense for them. I think if you look at cities over the last years, I think you'd be hard pressed to find cities who are not charging, at least on a cost recovery sense. So what we looked at was, what is the potential usage of these stations, and what do we need to recover our costs? And looking at the averages around our area, in the South Bay area. So that's where we came to the 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which seems to be kind of in line with other places.
Well, I have 2 electric vehicles, and I always walk in Hermosa Beach. Because they're all free.
I'd be surprised.
Mr. Woodham, did that answer your question?
For years ago. Yeah.
Yes, it did. I was just curious about if they're all free. It raises other questions, and since they're charged, that's fine.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Steve Johnson.
Yeah, the question was asked about which projects we might want to comment on or what we hear from people. And so there's one that always gets my attention. I'll give my annual speech on bicycle lanes and things like that. And I noticed there was quite a small dollars, but quite a number of projects for bicycle lanes and also traffic calming. So I know the traffic calming is important in certain areas. And so, for example, the Riviera, just driving around there at certain times of day, it's frightening driving because the pedestrians and people on electric bicycles and skateboards and baby carriages are leaping into the streets. And you're really terrified to turn. So that's a high pedestrian area, and I really see the value of that. In a lot of the rest of Redondo, and I know the comment was made that the bicycle programs are so popular, and I would ask, with who? I don't have the polls, but I don't know of anybody who's in favor of eliminating parking or narrowing most of the vehicle traffic ways so that a very tiny majority of people can be more comfortable riding bicycles. And I know that they're not always successful projects. So anybody who's ever driven right by the waterfront, as we have the two-way bicycle and skating traffic where you're trying to pull into Cheesecake Factory or, what used to be the Ruby's property or things like that. It's terrifying turning into those businesses or coming out of them when you've got bicycles and roller skaters going in both directions. So not criticizing the project, but from the driving point of view or for the bicyclist point of view, to have a dual way pedestrian or bicycle traffic that has to be crossed for vehicles to enter or exit businesses just seems to be an inherent hazard. So you asked for, are we doing the right things? I'm not complaining about the dollars. They're not that big. Anecdotally, the people I know in general are not supportive of driving down 190th and seeing wacky parking lines drawn in the wrong directions for whatever reason that happened, or creating areas where traffic is impeded so that we can increase bicycle traffic. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yeah, thank you. No, I just know that former Commissioner Hannon is in the attendees section. I think he could give a contrary opinion to the one that was just stated regarding bicycles. I don't know if he can talk, if he's in the attendee section, but
Well, I think at this point, when we get to the point of public comment, that may be the opportune time for former Commissioner Hannon to pipe in on that.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's the balance, and yeah, I have the same conflict as the former commissioner that spoke driving cars a lot of the times. But yeah, there is a conflict, and I just want to hear both sides. That's all.
Any other comments or questions from members of either commission? Seeing none, are there any comments from the public? I guess it's appropriate to ask for those.
There's no one raising their hand at this time. Oh, we just got one. So Jim Hannon. And some easies.
Are we seeing him or hearing him? I'm not.
I'm going to unmute him right now or ask him to unmute. Jim?
Jim, if you can hear us, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, okay. Hi, good evening. This is Jim Hannon. Listen, I don't want to jeopardize my ability to speak on the next item, which is the Diamond Street. So I don't know if I'd have an opportunity to speak on both. I appreciate Mr. Johnson's comments about cyclists, but it is a growing community for sure. And the object is to naturally get people out of automobiles and get them into active transportation. And the more we incentivize people to do that, the more people will participate in this, quite honestly. But I grant you that our infrastructure is not built to accommodate the large number of people that participate in active transportation today. I mean, we have seen a 300% and 400% increase in that movement since COVID hit, and we just don't have the infrastructure. And it is chaotic out there because we don't have the infrastructure to keep up with it. But I'm hoping that at some point we will, and at some point we'll have better behavior and because of the infrastructure. So, but I appreciate your comments, sir, and I know we've got an issue right now that we need to resolve.
Thank you, Mr. Hannon. So any other comments?
We have one more attendee that would like to speak. Chair Simpson, we have one more attendee that would like to speak.
You froze up.
Oh.
Bring up the attendee.
Budget report is given, or are they thinking about talking when we get to the back into the Public Works Commission meeting where we're taking up a specific bicycle path question?
I was going to speak on the specific bicycle path in question.
Yes, that is not on the agenda yet. We have to finish this joint meeting and then we'll take it up separately with the Public Works Commission meeting.
Good.
So
I will wait for that then. Thank you.
wait until that comes up.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point,
Commissioner Simpson, let me ask one more. Lauren, any e-comments?
Refresh.
I checked for me. I'm sorry, none. I interrupted you.
There are none.
Thank you. So are we looking for a motion from the joint meeting referring to the presentation that was just given? We receive and file it to both. I'm a little unsure of what the procedure should be here.
That's the recommendation, to receive and file the presentation.
And we've received a lot of your comments. If the commission feels compelled to do so, to have a specific recommendation, by all means, tell us that. But if you feel that you've given us enough comments that we can work with and prepare that to bring to the city council eventually, then we could work with that as well.
I leave it up to someone to make what they feel is the appropriate motion. I see.
I'll make the motion.
Very Glass has his hand up, so let's recognize Commissioner Glass.
Okay, and I was simply going to make the motion that we receive and file this.
Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Garcia, you have your hand up. Are you muted?
Oh yeah. Let me lower. Yeah. Did Commissioner Glass make the motion?
You made the motion. Are you prepared to second?
I am.
Does anyone wish to offer any amendment or anything that would highlight certain other things we would be recommending, or do we just we're letting the conversation and the record of that carry, and the motion is to receive and file? Looks like that's the case. Do we need to call the roll on this?
I think that's a good idea, Chairperson Simpson.
Or should we just put hands up if we're in favor? Is that too complex?
No, let's go through a roll call,
that,
please.
Call the roll? Okay. Let's call the roll.
I have a concern that receive and file confers an agreement or recommendation of the report. So I definitely would like to have a roll call.
Commissioner Arruda? You're on mute.
I'm sorry, you said Commissioner Woodham?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Arruda.
Okay, you're breaking up. I didn't hear you.
Commissioner Arruda?
I just have a question. So basically, I mean, this is a snapshot, and this is what we've got right now, but it's also can be changed and amended. So it's not like completely set in stone. We're just acknowledging it. And it was a very good presentation. And I understand that the board, some of the board members or commissioners would like some more detailed information, which I'm sure can be provided. But yeah, in that notion, yes, that's fine.
Commissioner Glass?
I made it. I agree.
Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Commissioner Funabashi?
Yes.
Commissioner Bajaj?
Yes.
Vice Chairman?
Yes.
Chair Simpson?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Jesse,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
I think, Steve, Commissioner Johnson, we're going to have an opportunity at Budget and Finance to take another look at this. So I agree with Commissioner Arata. I'll vote aye with the idea that we'll have another opportunity to weigh in on these things at our Budget and Finance Commission meeting. I'll vote aye.
Commissioner Samples,
In comment as Commissioner Solomon, and I will vote aye.
Commissioner Conroy,
I agree with Commissioner Johnson that voting yes may have some implication that we're agreeing with the information as presented. It was a good but incomplete presentation. So I will vote no.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Slightly different than Commissioner Conroy. I will abstain. I don't disagree. I don't have enough information to vote yes or no, so I abstain.
Chair Woodham,
I would define a vote here as saying simply we're accepting and filing without approval or disapproval. So I vote yes.
thank you.
Okay, that would appear to complete item L1, which was the discussion of the capital improvements projects. So I guess it's now time to ask for a motion to adjourn the joint meeting of Public Works and Budget and Finance Commissions. Is such a motion going to be made?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Solomon, and who seconded?
Conroy.
Very good. Can we do this with a voice vote? I think all those in favor of adjourning the joint session?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, well, in that case, it's time for me now to reconvene the regular meeting of the Public Works Commission.
Thank you, everyone.
Chairperson Simpson, I just want to say thank you to the Finance Commission for joining us tonight and a lot of your input. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.
You're all late. You can all stay if you wish. Okay, so I guess we now need a roll call again.
Commissioner Arata,
Present.
Commissioner Glass,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Is here.
Commissioner Bajaj,
Here.
Vice Chair Vin,
Here.
Chair Simpson.
I am present. And we have no items continued from the previous agendas. So we are now on item Q1. Now, I'm sorry, discussion and possible action on recommendations to the city manager for the upcoming fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. Isn't that what we just did? I'm not sure what Q1 is.
With that, we'll invite our city manager has actually just chimed on. Mike, I think we can hand this off to you to present and enlighten the commission on what you're asking them here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it might feel a little redundant at this point. I think you asked a fair question. I'm guessing you had a fairly robust conversation on the CIP here, judging by the time. So great, congratulations, thank you. I look forward to hearing from Ted and Andy, all the feedback you provided on some of the draft project concepts that we've been looking at. So I look forward to that. But this is really specifically an opportunity for you as Public Works Commissioners and residents to provide input to me on our preparation of the operating budget. So any of the initiatives that have been top of mind for all of you that you'd like us to consider as we prepare and deliberate on possible decision packages and changes to the budget going into 22-23. So no presentation from me. I'm sure you're all a little beat tonight. It's a long meeting. I'm ready to put my listening hat on and take in any input you might have and also answer any questions you might have about the operating budget really, we're looking to seek your input in advance of what will be the May 16th delivery of our operating budget, proposed operating budget to the city council. So I'm all ears and ready to listen. And won't be offended if you're too tired and not that either. So no pressure. whatever.
Commissioner, I see you have your hand.
Yeah, I think I'll repeat one of my comments from the prior session, which I think is relevant to, and then I have a kind of a new idea that I'd like to pitch. One is, a lot of, we had just talked about the capital program, and one of the challenges that we have as a city is just revenue, right, to pay for capital projects. We just don't have enough to pay for everything that we need to do. And so my comment at the time was that we need to go after more grants, essentially, especially with the federal infrastructure bill, budget surplus of the state. There's revenues coming in from the county, through potential increased sales taxes, like Measure W being like a new one recently, right? And so my comment was essentially, and Ted already said that this may be in the works already, but I just wanted to reiterate that it may be worth spending some operational budget to put together a strategic plan of how we go about identifying which grants to go after, especially grants that could help support the capital program and alleviate some of the pressure from the general fund. Of course, that needs to include administrative support, right, to administer grants. So grants are not easy to work with when you've had all kinds of strings tied to them and schedules and then kinds of reporting and invoicing and all kinds of extra stuff that has to happen to deliver them. So my comment is basically, hey, would it be real? I think given that staff probably have full-time jobs already, they don't have time to sit around writing a bunch of grant applications and putting together data and doing tons of community engagement. Let's put aside a little bit of money in the budget to do that, so that we can get tens of millions or however many millions it is to do some more capital projects for the city. That was my comment that I had kind of made during the previous discussion. And the second thing is, I could be wrong, but I haven't seen this on our website or anything public. I mean, there are files, council files and things. It'd be really nice to have some kind of portal that the public could look at to see all of our projects and see a master schedule of how things are going. Which I know is something that I'm sure the staff are like, oh, great, another thing I have to update on the quarterly basis or monthly basis or whatever it is. But I think it would be really helpful just to see it could just be like a master schedule, quick snapshot of what projects are out there for public works, just on a web page, and some very brief details about all the projects. It'd be really nice to see something like that, so we can like refer our neighbors and other people that we know in the community to those web pages for those project details. It's not a small feat, I understand, but it is something that, if someone can be put aside in the operational budget to help set that up, would be great. So those are my two comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate both of those. And I can tell you that the grants one, we certainly take to heart. Ted may have mentioned that we are in the process of going through a request for proposals for potential grant consultants that can perhaps help go out and chase some of that funding for us. We're certainly aware of what's available right now with the different federal infrastructure bills. The state's got quite a bit of surplus, and there's money there to be had as well for a variety of different programs and projects. So we are thinking along those same lines, and hopefully we'll have a consultant or at least some sense of cost associated with that, and perhaps grab a hold of some assistance to go out and identify kind of low-hanging fruit in that regard. We do think there's enough money out there where that kind of investment probably pays significant dividends. So we're looking at that, and hopefully we'll have something as part of the budget conversation.
Great to hear. That's great to hear. And if once you have that consultant selected, I think it would be great to have some kind of focus session with this commission or maybe offline with some of the members of this commission to help just figure out.
I appreciate that.
Get some direction to them. Yeah. Thanks.
And then the portal too, it's something we've been thinking about. It's going to take a little bit of technology for us, some new tech. We would love to have an outward facing dashboard that the residents and others could see kind of status report, high level status report. Probably wouldn't provide all the gory details of our project execution, but we'd have something there that folks could get a quick check-in on where we're at in the program and when they can expect their favorite project to be delivered. So we know that's important to the community.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
Other comments, questions, thoughts? Do we have any idea of what revenue projections are looking like for the coming year? I mean, was revenue affected by COVID, for instance, and situations like that with the sales tax?
Sure. Generally speaking, revenues are going to be very strong next year. Property tax will be as high as it's ever been. Sales tax should be higher than previous peaks. The one area where even utility user tax, surprisingly, is stopped its kind of general plateau and might climb a bit. The one area where we haven't fully recovered is transient occupancy tax, our hotel tax. And that's because we have an obligation under a former site-specific tax pledge that helped backstop the financing for the Marine Avenue Hotel development there, the 3 hotels off of Marine Avenue near the 405. It's called an authority-funded reserve that was provided to the financiers to help them gain final financing for construction. Unfortunately, the waterfall provisions in the contract with the banks allow certain triggers for them to draw down from that reserve. The pandemic was one of them. And so they were able to effectively pull, and the fund that was there was created through an influx of initial TOT that was spun off at the site. As they drew that down, the obligation under the bond documents is that it actually gets replenished by accrued TOTs as it goes forward. So this next fiscal year, while the 3 sites will be doing well and operationally won't need the relief that was provided under those provisions, any TOT generated from that site will first have to accrue to that fund before it will come to the city. So we are effectively next fiscal year going to be short about $3 million of our TOT potential. We should see it in the 23-24 fiscal year, but that is one revenue source that will be shy of peak for us. So, that said, all other revenues look pretty good. Our programmatic revenues are still coming back in the recreation services area. They're not quite at peak, but generally speaking, our general taxes in particular are strong. So we'll be juxtaposing those revenues with new demands for expense. As you know, it's an inflationary world, and Public Works in particular has been hit pretty hard by that. So we have a lot of calls on and draws against our new revenues, assuming we have net new revenues above that TOT circumstance I described. So all told, I feel okay about the budget, but I am a little worried about some of these inflationary pressures, and I am very much worried about trying to restore for all of our operating departments many of the positions that were eliminated as part of the budget cuts a couple years ago when the pandemic first hit. So we're trying to slowly build back staff resources, that along with some of these other inflationary pressures is going to be a little bit of a challenge, I think.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Funabashi.
Thank you, Chair Simpson. Just a quick comment and then a request of staff as our Public Works Commission will continue to meet when we actually get into the next fiscal year. And that was, first, all of us might have noticed a significant interest between our 2 commissions, with Budget and Finance being very interested in all the nuts and bolts and all the different line items on any one particular project. And while I can appreciate that, we've certainly deliberated through staff reports when, even trying to decide what components of a traffic calming measure that we wanted to implement. So I just was certainly noticing the differences there. But back to the needs of our commission, I just couldn't help but make note that, for example, we have $450,000 in the next fiscal year earmarked for traffic calming. And the request I have going forward would be perhaps to, if staff is able to, like when we're looking at a particular street and working on a specific location on a traffic calming proposal and the different components, I mean, obviously as individual commissioners, we look at what's the cost of 2 additional stop signs or line striping or bulb outs or cutaways, you know, all the different price components. And I certainly individually look at those and try to size up what that intersection really is worth or what it deserves. But here's my request. If there was a way to keep a running budget of where we're at any given point in a fiscal year of where that 450,000 is. Let's say like in July or August, we approve a project and it's going to be 25,000. Okay, so now we know we've got 425. Going forward the next month, we might have another traffic calming that's going to be 50,000. So if we could, as a commission, be presented with what our running balance is within the budget, I think that might be helpful overall, just to know where we stand, you know, within the fiscal year and where our funds are at. Obviously, it's going to be very interesting the way inflation will factor in, the cost versus revenue, and we know that's, you know, who's got a crystal ball, right? But just so that, you know, as we get the staff reports on individual proposals, that we kind of have an idea of where each little pocket of money that's earmarked for that, where are we at that, you know, kind of a year-to-date update. I think that would be helpful, certainly me, in understanding where we are and looking at a specific project, how much we might be able to consider for that project, knowing that we're only halfway through the year and we're probably going to get a few more traffic calming. And I just use traffic calming as one example that might be something presented to this commission. Certainly other areas of the budget that we might be tasked with deciding what components and what the related costs might be. Again, just to have a running budget and know where we're at any given point would certainly help me and perhaps the rest of the commission in you know, deciding what components to really vote for as we make these suggestions to mayor and council. So that's my request.
Sure. And yeah, I appreciate that. We'll do our best to provide that sort of inventory. It used to be that when we created the traffic calming account, it was very generic. Money was there, and then there would be the, you know, ensuing request for speed cushions or stop signs, and we would kind of draw from that fund. These days, it feels like our traffic calming efforts are so much more robust with bulb outs or other treatments that are a little bit more expensive. Feels like when we're populating this project account, we're actually putting in there almost, you know, singular street intersection, you know, concepts. And I think we have a better understanding, I think, now of what is funded, what's in motion. We don't have as much just sitting there kind of waiting to be spent, but we'll try to get you an updated budget response report that really lays out what's been funded, what's been built, and then what's coming. There's quite an inventory now. And we just, I think, added to it a little bit. And this commission was very helpful in it as well, with the conclusion of the Riviera Village pedestrian mobility assessment. And, you know, there's going to be some additional, I think, projects that are going to come from that as part of the CIP. So, yeah, I appreciate the thought, and we'll try to get you a bit of a running tab, so to speak. But these days, it feels like we're putting hundreds of thousands in to do like kind of single street or corridor enhancements. Everything's just so expensive. But yeah, appreciate the thought for sure.
Commissioner Arata.
So I have a question. Because of the lack of resources for staff, has that affected the length of projects or the timeline on any of these projects to be able to keep them, you know, in a more timely manner? They don't go on and on and on.
Yeah, I don't. You know, it's a tough question. I think maybe it has an effect the length of projects we've designed and are in some level of construction. I think it's affected the quantity of projects we can successfully manage at any one time. Once we get it in the hopper, we do a really good job, I think, getting it executed and out. Where we struggle a little bit is just overall bandwidth to complete pre-design and design work for all of the just litany of capital projects that are in the fund. I mean, 16 years ago when I started, we had, we might have 50 to 60, maybe 70 projects in our 5-year CIP. What do we have now, Ted and Andy? 135, 140 projects. I mean, we couldn't even have dreamed of that much capital funding available to us, 15 years ago. So it's the quantity, I think, of execution that maybe suffers due to lack of resources. I think Ted and Andy have been very efficient and effective, and their staff in getting as much done as possible. But really, for us to do more, I think we're going to have to grow our resources a little bit if we want to get more done in any one given year. Hopefully,
Thank you.
Question.
Sure. Thank you.
The other questions or comments?
One more comment or question. When you're doing like these street improvement projects and all these other projects, is there some type of benchmark or they use like with other comparisons for timelines for the completions of the projects?
Yeah, good question. I think for street projects, the one benchmark we really use is, and we've been very dedicated to this, it's our 3-year assessment of our street conditions, our condition index. And I can tell you with our efforts, our pavement, our PCI, our citywide PCI is growing every year. So getting ahead of where we were before we started those efforts. So at least in that regard, I think we're performing very well, and we have a pretty good metric to tell us that. The challenge would be us trying to compare, okay, we're going to execute X miles of roadway work this year. It took us 2.5 years from funding to execution, get it done. How does that compare to our peers? Every street segment is so unique by community.
I know.
We're a city that's now, we're over 100 years old, right? What's underneath our streets is a lot different than what's underneath the city that was built in 1970, right?
Sure.
And the advantage that particularly like Orange County and other cities have in their master plan underneath their roadway segments, really it helps, I think, just allows them less obstacles as they go forward with things. So I feel like whenever we do something now, we're moving about 4 other things to get it done.
Right.
And take Englewood, take the right turn lane southbound Englewood to go westbound Manhattan Beach Boulevard as an example. There was an old arrangement with Metropolitan Water District that they argued predated our ordinance right for right-of-way acquisition and things. I mean, dealing with really old utilities that can create quite a bottleneck for us. So I think it's good. We should be comparing to peers. The key is finding peers that really kind of look and have some of our kind of apples to apples challenges.
Right. It seems like it's not
really
so many variables. Yeah.
Not to mention we're end of pipe from a storm drain standpoint, right? We're a beach city, so
absolutely
here. So we have all the wonderful things that come with that requirement.
Sure.
Inland neighbors don't really have to suffer.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, this was a very useful, I hope you found some of these comments helpful.
Very much, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all you're doing. It's a long night to kind of go through both these items, but CIP, that's a real big one. We certainly look forward to your input every year on that draft plan. And like I said, I look forward to sitting down with Ted and Andy and the staff to digest what they heard tonight. And we'll go through it and we'll make our final recommendations based on that input and ultimately what funding we identify as being available as we go into the budget cycle here. So we should have a pretty good handle on that in the next few weeks.
So I think this was a useful conversation to have. I don't think we need a motion for this, do we?
No, I'm just taking notes and appreciate it. And we'll if you got any other ideas, don't be a stranger. You know where to find me by email or phone, and always looking for input from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, have a great rest of the evening. And
now moving on to, I guess item Q2, which is the bike facility improvements on the 1400 block of Diamond Street. It's a very interesting little block.
All right, well, thank you, Chair Simpson. I'll be taking this one tonight. And really, I'm just going to be introducing a team from the Beach Cities Health District who can give you more information on the project and their proposal. I'll do a quick little introduction first. So I'll share my screen. I have a couple of slides to share with you. Did I get that right? Or are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Can you see?
It's correct.
Yes, it's correct.
My screen just moved, so I don't see my slides. Let me try and move you guys. Oh, there we go. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so this project was brought to us by the Beach Cities Health District, another government agency, by the way, grant-funded project to make bicycle improvements. The larger project is to improve, kind of close the gap between the Diamond and Prospect intersection and the Flagler and Carroll Street intersection. It starts at that south end in our city. It crosses the city boundary into Torrance. And the intersection of Beryl and Flagler is shared by the two cities, but most of the bike facilities are on the Torrance side in through there. So really the portion we're dealing with is just the 1400 block of Diamond Street. The project is proposed to be in the right of way. And it is part of our, this is a excerpt from the South Bay Bicycle Master Plan. I've got a circle around the area I'm talking about. This blue color is the campus of the Beach Cities Health District. This red line, which according to legend is an existing class 2 bike lane, which I believe is true, is Diamond. Prospect is this dashed line, which is an existing or a proposed class 2 in the Bicycle Master Plan. And so it's this little piece that goes from this intersection up around the east side of the facility and connects at Beryl and Flagler. As you can see from the legend that there is there's proposed class 1 bike path through part of it, proposed a bike-friendly street as it was called back in 2011. I think the project proposal is something different now. And then this little block here, which I've circled on this zoom in that area, is what we're talking about tonight. Unclear what the Bicycle Master Plan proposed for that time, but we'll look at the couple of alternatives tonight. Here's an aerial view of the block that we're talking about. Beach Cities Health District campus is up here towards the top of the photo. And then you see Prospect and Diamond Street intersection. And then there's, just wanted to call attention to 6 homes along this block that have driveways onto the block. Beach Cities Health District also abuts that lane, but has no vehicle access to that block.
Like your assessment.
Oh, 2 alternatives that were presented to us, and this is again just an excerpt of what Beach Cities sent, so they might be sharing some more information. And apologies that this wasn't part of the agenda packet. It was intended to be, but we slipped up and didn't get that included. So it is part of your blue folder materials tonight that you approved earlier. 2 alternatives. On the left is a class 3, which is the shared lane, vehicle bicycle lane indicated with, as we call them. And then on the right is the class 2 alternative bike lane, which the diagram indicates kind of in a purple color, vehicle path of travel, I guess tested for a 30 or 23 foot delivery van, it looks like, and parking on the south side of both the median and the parkway side of Diamond in that kind of northeastbound direction. So I'm going to let Beach Cities Health District talk about this more completely, and we'll try and answer your questions together. And the question we're really looking for is just input onto a preferred alternative here from this commission. The Beach Cities Health District is doing this project. It's not a city project. They will be presenting it at some point to our city council because it does change some of the roadway alignment dynamics. So we'll need to take that to council for approval at some point in the future. They can give you more information on timing. there as well. So with that, I'm gonna, our recommendation is to provide any input, but I'm gonna hand it over to Jacqueline for introduction of her team and continuation of the presentation. And I'll stop sharing. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. I'm Jacqueline Sun. I'm the director of, can you hear me okay? Am I glitchy? Okay, great. I'm Jacqueline Sun. I'm the Director of Wellbeing Services with the Beach Cities Health District. Good evening, commissioners, late evening. Appreciate your input tonight. Thank you, Andy, for that overview. I have our team here, Ryan Liu from Fair and Piers, our engineers, as well as our project manager, John Reeser, who can answer any scope questions. Just wanted to provide some quick context. As Andy mentioned, this is a multi-jurisdictional project. And the portion of the discussion tonight is just the diamond portion, but this project serves as an important closed gap bicycle infrastructure that connects North and South Redondo, connects the beach to big commercial corridors, future transit lines, El Camino College, and why this, but also we have long championed our Blue Zones project principles that focus on environmental and policy change to enhance well-being. I've been before this commission many times to advocate for living streets policies and projects, street safety, enhanced active transportation. All of these core principles of the built environment work continue to be a health priority with the district. And so, as Andy mentioned, this project is funded by Measure M dollars that we received in 2019 in the amount of $1.8 million. The original design that was proposed had a bidirectional class 1 on the north side of Diamond, adjacent to the BCHD property, and then kind of continued down to the Flagler Alley, as Andy mentioned. There were some safety concerns with that potential drawings. As we asked our partners at the South Bay Bicycle Coalition what their thoughts were, especially when you're having a bidirectional class 1 transition to class 2 bike lanes. There's also always issues about what happens when people get onto and off of those bike lanes, and just some conflict of crossing Prospect. And so hearing that input, we went back to the city to provide these two alternatives that are presented tonight. And while the class 2, we usually think we want a higher level class to protect those cyclists and provide more comfortable riding conditions. It is such a short stretch, not a lot of conflict points with cars. And in asking our partners with the Bike Coalition, they actually preferred the Sharrows option. I know that they're on this call tonight. They can talk to you about some of the merits of that. And the door zone being one of the issues of safety concern that they brought up. And also, like I said, not a lot of conflict points given how short of a distance this is. So we definitely want to defer to the people who are going to be riding, those experts with the coalition. So that is our request, that we recommend the option of the class 3, but definitely appreciate your input in this. And we have our team, Ryan and John, who can answer any specific questions about the design or scope. So happy to answer questions.
Can I go? You're muted, Commissioner Simpson, if you're. Well, I guess I'll ask the first question. I would imagine the volumes are extremely low on this cul-de-sac, right? Essentially just the residents of those few homes there. Is that correct?
Vehicular volume, Commissioner Min?
Yeah, vehicular volumes. And I guess, now that I ask it, I assume pedestrian volumes are also fairly low. I would imagine a ton of people are walking around here.
They are low. I don't know if we have any numbers. They are low, but we've seen a lot of pedestrians actually use that area today to go between Prospect and up into the...
Yeah, a lot of high school kids and middle school kids walking up from Paris and Redondo.
Oh, okay. So there's actually, a lot of people are using that that little alleyway for cutting across then. Okay, so that's interesting. I mean, to me, I kind of agree with the Cheryl's concept, given the low vehicular volumes here. It seems like it allows the bike to essentially take the lane, right? And have full access to the roadway, not deal with the door zone, deal with driveways, deal with, the parked cars and all that. And given how low the potential vehicular volumes are, it seems like a little bit of overkill to stripe bike lanes and do all the signage and all that for this little stretch. But in looking at the exhibit though, you're showing in the alleyway itself, which I guess is not really part of this discussion, it's only a 4-foot width wide lane in both directions with a 2-foot buffer. That seems very narrow.
Hi, Commissioner. I can speak on that. This is Ryan with Fair and Piers. I've been helping Beach City's Health District with this project. To circle back actually to the vehicular volume, we actually helped the district prepare the EIR for a separate project, and we do have an account for that intersection at Prospect and Diamond, and I can confirm that the volumes are low for the Diamond intersection. So you are correct on that. For the alleyway width, so we wanted to designate this alleyway as a class 1 shared use bike path. The minimum widths for that are 4-foot bike lanes and 2-foot shoulders generally. Okay. We found that due to some of the construction costs and the grading concerns needed to put in a retaining wall, we had to come down to the minimums just due to the width of the existing alley.
Okay, I mean, so I guess that's fine as long as that's within, I guess it would be AASHTO spec or.
This one would be Caltrans Highway Design Manual.
The Highway Design Manual, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, I guess my only comment is I guess it's fine. I would prefer a Shero type of treatment, so that would be whatever. Concept 1, first concept. Yeah. Thanks.
That was A, I believe.
Okay, Commissioner Garcia.
Yeah, I just had a question on did Fair and Piers do a analysis of like which alternative was safer? It seems to me like you have the class 2 bike lanes and separated the car lanes, and then of course the other one you have the Sheros where the bikes and the cars both use the same lane, and so it seems like by having that separation, is that safer for that short span, lower volume type of application, or is the other one more safe?
I think from a general perspective, a class 2, a dedicated facility, as you're alluding to, it is safer, separating the bikes and cars whenever possible. In general, that is safer, but perhaps in this particular context, with the street only being about 200 feet long, the safety trade-off and benefit is probably very small between the class 3 with the Sheros and the class 2 bike lane, just because the volumes are so low. But the point is taken that in a general sense, a dedicated facility is safer than a not dedicated facility.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say that in this discussion, we're also talking about the trade-off between that short stretch on Diamond, and as I don't know if it's already been mentioned, but having the class 2 would eliminate parking on one side of that street for those residences. So it's that's kind of the topic that we wanted to bring to this commission and talking about in the trade-off of having a higher class and more comfort and safety for the cyclists at the expense of losing some parking.
Yeah, and actually that's two sides of the parking, actually.
Commissioner.
Okay, well, go ahead.
All right. I'll defer to Commissioner Garcia to finish.
I was just gonna say, so it sounds to me from what they said, it's basically a trade-off about parking. So the class 2, you would lose parking, and the class 3 option, you would save some parking. I think that's the benefit, right?
That's correct. Yeah, with the class 3 Sheros option, the parking that's there today would remain.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Hi, Jacqueline. Thank you, obviously, to Beach Cities Health District for taking the initiative on this. And if I understand correctly, even undertaking the cost through the grant that was received. And what stood out to me without even knowing what the actual costs are, that obviously the two different options probably have a fairly significant difference in cost. And it seems like, generally we are leaning towards, the more simpler sharrows and with it still being relatively safe. My question is, has anyone talked to the 6 owners as far as about I know it's a public street, but when you have 6 owners of homes that pretty much feel like they own that street, even though it is a city street, to start taking away parking lot and making significant alterations and even whatever impact alterations the construction might be, dare I say, I think they're kind of probably want to just, from their perspective, want to lean towards the more less infringing, less altering to their parking availability and that kind of stuff. So I am kind of leaning towards the more simpler option of the class 3. So that's just kind of my comments. The last thing I'll say is, wow, what a surprise. I had no idea, was never aware of that little alleyway that ran through there, but I could see, where it obviously is quite logical the way it kind of comes behind Beach Cities Health District and comes out through Flagler that way. The only other question I have, and this may be one to you, Ryan, as the consultant, is there any thought that the development of this class 2 or 3, whatever we might suggest, is it going to be publicized, and is it thought that it might actually increase the amount of bike traffic through that area compared to what it is now?
Yeah, I think that would more be associated with the larger, project through the alley and up to Barrel Street. And I think Jacqueline can speak to this more on the whole general bike project and the aims of it and what it intends to do.
I hope you can hear me. I was having some connectivity issues. I think what I understood the question to be is, if we build it, will they come? And yes, so I think, this essentially abandoned alleyway is currently, even though it's an abandoned alleyway, still currently being used, as we mentioned, for people who are trying to cut through that neighborhood into that South Redondo area and access. So it is it's an actually really important connector point to get access to South Redondo from that rest of that area. And so it's currently being used for cyclists. It's currently being used for pedestrians, but these enhancements, I think, will just make people feel a lot safer in order to do that. And I'm not as well versed in the cycling community as I know some of our advocates here on the line would be. So I think that they could also speak to that question, Commissioner Funabashi, of how important this connection point is to not only connect important places within the cities, but also regional connection that Metro is looking for to connect, folks from the beach to the transit center to El Camino College. So I know that this is an important part of a larger plan.
Thank you. And the other question that I had, though, was is there been any outreach to those 6 homeowners as to what their thoughts are? Are they aware of the proposals, and have they chimed in on any particular input?
The city sent letters to each of those residences in preparation for this meeting. So the city's done that much. Whether or not Beach Cities has done more than that, I'm not sure.
So, go ahead.
I know that our advocates from the Bike Coalition have talked to some of the residents as well. They can voice some of the findings that they have of some of the residents on that street. I know that the issue, I would assume, would just be about the loss of parking, though we haven't gotten any formal comments on this item tonight. Is that right, Andy? Besides, written comments?
I believe we had one. Lauren, can we get to that section?
We get to comments. Let's wait on that.
Okay, good to know. I just want to, and I appreciate knowing that, Andy, because that's critical. If I understood you correctly, notice of this hearing went out to those people, and maybe even beyond that street, as we do, Do I understand that right? So they had every opportunity to come and participate and give input tonight. And if they're here, they're here. And if they're not, they're not.
Yeah, we just noticed this block, which is typical for a loss of parking type of issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vice Commissioner Min, could you take over the chair here for a couple of minutes, please? I have to excuse myself.
Sure, no problem. So I think Commissioner Bajaj, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with many of the comments that were out here earlier for the short stretch, particularly if our, bicycle advocates and experts are here and have also kind of, supported one design over the other. It seems to be an overall benefit then for the residents with the less, impact of the parking, less, aesthetic disruption with additional striping. So I would support then the option which the coalition has supported as well with the Sharrows and just kind of, keeping it a little bit less intensive on this particular block, given the short block. And then to Commissioner Funabashi's point, I never knew about this little connection either until my middle schooler has started walking home from Paris Middle School, and because I live in the neighborhood up there on Flagler north of 190th. So I know that there's several middle schoolers who use that little area and high schoolers from our neighborhood who use that connection to get to and from the schools down there.
Commissioner Arata. I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that was my question on the parking. Just wondering how many spots would that eliminate? And is that, I'm sorry, if I didn't hear you, was it city property parking or was it the property of the beach cities?
We didn't do a formal count of the number of spaces that would be lost, but it would approximately be half of the current spaces, primarily because the current street has 4 faces of parking. And with the class 2 option, we would remove 2 of those. So about half of the spaces. And then this is on city right away. And then with the class 3 option, no change.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Glass.
Commissioner Funabashi raised an issue with the alleyway, and I realize that's not the primary area of interest here, but I'm a little concerned if we have a lot of pedestrians going along this narrow bike path. They'll be walking the line of least resistance, and we're mixing bikes and pedestrians, and I'm a little worried about that. I'd like to hear what the Beach District, Health District has to say about that.
Yeah, actually with the alley, there's currently, there's an alley portion that's at street level, and then there's a sidewalk, 8-foot wide sidewalk on the alley. And so the plan is to preserve that. And so we would have the 2-foot, 4-foot, 4-foot, 2-foot alleyway just for the bikes. And then next to it would be your traditional sidewalk, which is 8 feet wide.
I'm just trying to envision the site if I can. That's not on the street, right? That's the alleyway. In a sense, the smallest part of this project is the 400 or the 1400 block of Diamond, right?
Correct.
Other questions?
Give you a visual if that would help. So the alley, and Jacqueline, help me here, but you wouldn't be changing the curb line as I understand it. Is that right? That's correct. Yeah, so the existing sidewalk that's fronting those 6 homes would just continue as a sidewalk on the alley.
Yeah, that's really cool. So now I have another question. We're talking about the Redondo Beach side of this, which is the 1400 block of Diamond. The alleyway goes through, that's still Redondo Beach. And then when it hits Beryl, that street is shared with Torrance. When it hits Flagler.
So actually it hits Torrance in the middle of the alley. So the Torrance border sort of cuts diagonally through the alley.
Oh, through the alley. Part of the alley is Torrance.
Yeah, so part of the alley is with Torrance.
When you come out all the way through the alley, you end up on Flagler, and then you would turn, I guess the bike path would then go, what would that be? That would be north on Flagler up to Barrow, right?
Correct.
What sort of provisions for the bicycle lane are being suggested for that portion of Flagler? Or is that not our concern because that's in Torrance?
It is in Torrance, but I can share that is still under discussion with the city of Torrance.
Okay. Other questions from any commissioners? Commissioner Bajaj.
Just an idea or maybe a discussion point for our staff engineers. Once you get up to the Redondo Beach side of Flagler, north of Burrell, I believe there's that bike lane that continues up to 190th, correct?
Sure.
And then Flagler.
Class 3.
And then Flagler between 190th and Grant is, I guess, kind of like a collector street. I don't know how you designate it, if it's a local or a collector, but there's no parking on either side. And it seems like the lane width would accommodate perhaps a bike lane on Flagler to run that span. And then you could connect it up to Grant. Striping a bike lane on Flagler between 190th to Grant could serve as a valuable connection for this whole area up to, the bike lane which you have on Grant, which then can go east towards the North Redondo bike path. It's some topic for discussion, or something for consideration for the future.
Yeah, not on the agenda.
Number of
trying to steer away.
Pardon me?
Not on the agenda exactly. So I was
right. Yeah,
just conversations.
Yeah.
I will look at the bicycle master plan. I know in plan view it looks like a direct shot. I don't know what the elevation changes are like off the top of my head, and sometimes that makes a big difference on a preferred bike lane.
Got it. There's definitely some slight grade adjustments. Vertical curvature.
I mean, the clearest way to the north is to hang a right on once you get to Barrel and ride that down. And eventually we'd like to do something at Barrel 190th as you head east over towards Anza.
Yeah.
There are stripe lanes, et cetera, but that's for the future.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Arata, you still have your hand up. Do you have a further comment?
I don't. Sorry about that.
All right. Do we have public comment?
Yes, we have 3 attendees that would like to speak. We'll start with Sim Easies.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sim Ezies. I'm a board member of the SBBC. Plus, I'm a longtime cyclist and 25-year resident of Redondo Beach. And everybody I know cycles. I am speaking in favor of the proposed construction of the bike and pedestrian paths behind the BCHD. That route is one I regularly use when I return home from the beach cycling paths. I mean, this is once or twice a week we're talking here. Anything that would create a more attractive, safer path will encourage more use from a wider variety of people. Any and all encouragement should be given to high school and middle school students to use that path, which would alleviate the ridiculous traffic jams created during drop-off and pickup. While I have cycled with one high school student through that path, I would rather cycle with about 20 or 30 of them. This route forms a part of an essential connection for the students in North Redondo to schools and friends in South Redondo. And in discussing routes with my neighbors up here in North Redondo, I know that they feel that there is no reasonable path to the beach. Families and beginners need a safe, practical route to the beach bike path. No one wants to climb the hills on 190th, as you so noted. Cycling or walking behind the BCHD leads directly to the sidewalks and bike lanes on Diamond, which lead to a protected bike path on Catalina. With this path in place, other farther reaching paths can be created to connect Torrance and North Redondo to schools and the beach. Hopefully a greater sense of community can be created between North and South Redondo with this path. In my opinion, Sherrills provide the best path into and out of the Class 1 bike path for a couple of reasons. One, that's what I always do. I always block the lane. If you have the two Class 2 bike paths create two crossovers where cars can cross the bike path. Those are points of conflict. Simpler and cleaner just to use the sharrows and go into the lane and the sharrows to come out of the lane. The only thing I would suggest to add to any of this is a bike sensor so that, please, God, we could get across the street without having to wait for a car to come up and trip the sensor. Other than that, that's all the comments I have. I'd like to thank the commissioners for their efforts in making Redondo Beach a safer and better place to live. Thank you so much.
Other public comment? I suspect Jim Hannon is there.
Your suspicions are correct.
Sorry, you're muted, Jim.
Okay. Good to see everybody, by the way. It's been a while. Good evening, commissioners, Beach City's Health District staff and city staff. My name is Jim Hannon. I'm a 41-year resident in the city of Redondo Beach. Now, I'm also a board member of the South Bay Bicycling Coalition Plus. And we advocate for all people that participate in active transportation, like walkers, runners, cyclists, and more. We're very excited to support this project. It was proposed in 2011, and I was extremely pleased to see it on tonight's agenda. I was much younger in those days when it was proposed. But anyway, I know it might be hard to believe that such a small infrastructure project like this would make such a huge positive impact on so many walkers and bicyclists, but it does. If you zoom out on the local map and take a look at the bigger picture, you'll see the connectivity with other bike routes, as well as safe routes to school, our educational institutions like Redondo High, Pat Deisler Continuation School, and Towers Elementary School in Torrance. This particular route provides safe routes to school option. If children would like to walk or ride their bike to school, and it likely reduce auto trips and less drop-offs and pickups by parents, and provide active residents with another safe route to get to the beach, to get to the pier, Seaside Lagoon, and other local popular destinations. I asked the commissioner to consider the installation of sharrows on Diamond Avenue. This will help the cyclist avoid the dreaded door zone and improve the safety of all road users. In addition, I am asking the commission to make sure the traffic sensor on Diamond Street will register when a bicycle approaches the intersection, and given that person ample time to get across Prospect Avenue. I also would like to urge the commission to vote in favor of this sharrow option and move the project forward. And I'd like to thank all the commissioners as well. I know it's a tireless effort by you all, and I really appreciate all that you've done to make our community safe, live, live, and play. And by the way, I did want to comment a little bit, because we did have some prior meetings, and to pick up some community input from the residents in Torrance and North Redondo, and it was unanimous. They were all in favor of the sharrow options. It would have the least impact on the neighbors. And with the door zone there, they felt it would be much safer for cyclists. So I hope you will move this project on. Thank you.
Is there other public comment?
Yes, we have one more. Jeffrey Gilbert.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I am a resident on Diamond Street. And no, Beach City's Health District has not come to the residents at all about this directly. We read about a project several years ago that they were proposing a $1.8 million plan to, build something on this. And correct me, what is an abandoned alleyway? Is that a legal termination, or is that what most people would believe is a alleyway that nobody cares about? Because this is what Beach City's Health District uses all the time to describe this particular alleyway. Anyway, it is used extensively by school children going to and from Redondo High, Paris, and Barrel Heights Elementary School, as well as kids going to the beaches and back and forth. In addition to children bicyclists, we have a lot of adult cyclists. Most of the kids especially don't really care what side of which direction of the street they're going on. Diamond Street is a one-directional street. You make a U-turn at the end where the alleyway is. Kids being kids, they go down either way. And most of all the cyclists pretty much go down the middle of the street. The Diamond Street itself sees very, very little traffic. Once you get to the alleyway, there is no vehicular traffic at all except for motorcycles. This alleyway is used by the Redondo Beach Police Department to drive back and forth from across from Flagler and that side of Redondo to the Prospect side of Redondo. It cannot be used for cars because there's a blockade at the Flagler end. I would like to see something done with this alleyway. I would like to see more participation from Beach City's Health District itself in policing the hillside that it owns. It's on its property. They usually let the weeds, trees, shrubbery go to the point where we've had a problem with homeless people living on the hill, sleeping on that same sidewalk that the kids walk to and from on a daily basis. Even in the green space area, which is directly across Redondo Beach, we've had homeless people actually build some pretty neat little houses back there. And it's taken the neighbors to actually contact Beach City's Health System to let people know that they've got campers in that area. Nevertheless, I don't think it's necessary to paint bicycle lanes on the Diamond side. The point of having a bicycle crossing at Diamond Street and Prospect, where somebody would push a button or they would know that a bicyclist there, is very important, especially for the kids who really don't even care if there's a green light there. If they don't see cars, they'll go across Prospect. Another thing that's very important about that intersection, and I cannot emphasize this more, at nighttime, when cars are coming up Diamond Street from the beach and they reach Prospect Avenue, 99% of the time they're going to take a left or a right turn. And at nighttime, for some reason, maybe it's an optical thing, people are not seen in the crosswalk. Me and my family have crossed that street in the dark many, many times, and cars, once they get the green light, will turn onto Prospect Avenue, and we're in the middle of the street. And most of those people say, "I'm sorry, we didn't even see you there." So it's concerning if you have kids on bicycles, especially these electric bikes that now are cruising at 25 miles an hour, and they all go 25 miles an hour, crossing that road. That's a very dangerous part of the aspect. The other dangerous part is once you get onto Flagler, at the other end of the alley, there is no bicycle strip there. And Flagler turns into Torrance at that point. So it's kind of a blind turn. And anybody crossing Flagler or crossing from the alley onto Flagler, if they are on the right side of the alley from Prospect going to Flagler, are going to be crossing traffic at that point. If they stayed on the left side of the alley onto Flagler, which is on the side of the Bond Shopping Center and Beach Cities Health District, there's no crossing of traffic at that point. But they're going to be on just one side of that road. So that's something to really take a look at if you're going to examine that. The other thing is the condition of
This is not the case. Also, Mr. Gilbert, comments are generally limited to about 3.
Sorry, I'm sorry, but there is nobody else on. Oh, the alleyway itself, the asphalt is in need of repair. It's pretty rough, not horrible, but it could be smooth. No one's taking care of that. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other public comments? Commissioner Arata, your hand is still up. I assume you just neglected to take it down. Is that, you have no comment? Okay, thank you.
If I may interrupt, Commissioner or Chair Simpson, Lauren, did you say we had an e-comment? Something to be read?
No, there's no e-comments.
Okay, my apologies.
Well, then I guess it would be in order to ask for a motion. From what I heard of all the conversations, everyone seemed to favor the Sharrows approach, the Class 3, unless I misheard that. That's certainly what I would be in favor of. So would someone be inclined to make a motion?
Good question.
I'm inclined to make a motion, and then obviously there's room for further discussion. I'll make a motion that we recommend the Sharrows option to include a sensitive device that will register changing of the light that will recognize a bicycle.
Second for that motion. No second for the motion? Hey, Commissioner Arata?
I do have a question. Andrew, do you know the gentleman that was speaking from the public comment mentioned that it was came up like in 2011. Do you know why it was it has taken 10 years to do anything with that?
Jim, close your ears on this one, okay? I know you don't like the answer. The South Bay Bicycle Master Plan was adopted by the city in 2011, but there were no specifics on the actual projects themselves. So it's taken the city until now to address a number of projects that were addressed. And actually this one was brought forward by Beach Cities Health District. It's not a city project. We're grateful for it. Of course, the improvement is helpful. But
whatever is done on Diamond Street would be done by the city, correct?
No, this is a Beach Cities Health District project. The city would approve it because it is changing or potentially changing alignment to the street if we do striping and that kind of thing. But no, it would be implemented by the Beach Cities Health District's contracting.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Funabashi that we recommend the Sharrows approach and the installation of a bicycle sensor at the intersection. And is there a second for that motion? I see Commissioner Bajaj, your hand is up.
I wanted to clarify something, or just maybe with Commissioner Funabashi's. So our motion, the motion is to recommend the Class 3 treatment and recommend bike detection. I guess my concern is, will the bike detection, I would like to have them separate so one doesn't delay the other. You see what I'm saying? Like if the bike detection requires some type of signal design plan, which could end up, into a longer process, I don't want that to hold up any
I think
the striping treatment. So although that recommendation might stand, I wanted clarification if they're going to be tied together or not.
He's made the recommendation that both happen, and they aren't contingent, I wouldn't think. They would be.
I think I could amend it. I could definitely amend it or to restate it. And thank you for, I think the recommendation would be a class 3 bicycle lane to include as described as sharrows. With the recommendation of the bike detection signal, but the addition of how do I word this? It's late. Almost like an and or, where neither would inhibit the installation of the other. Help me with the wordsmithing. I see your point.
Yeah,
we're just making a recommendation. Anyway,
yeah, maybe a motion, a recommendation to, recommend the class 3 bike treatment and recommend any bicycle detection enhancements.
I think as long as
if I have clarification on that, then I'm fine.
The motion stands. In no way are those two things contingent on the on
right.
So that
I don't think they are. And
it certainly is not the intention that be the case, and that can be shown in the minutes. So the motion on the floor, I think, is still, as was just stated by Commissioner Funabashi, it still does need a second. So if everyone is more or less comfortable with what the motion is that he has made, I would ask someone to please second the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Was that Commissioner Bazaj or that? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I guess at this point, what we need then is, Commissioner Min, your hand is up.
Yeah, we just want to some discussion, right? And then we can take a vote. Very quick, the gentleman from the homeowner who lives there was mentioning the pavement condition. I think generally when we do these kind of bike stripings, whether it be sharrows or lanes or whatever, we have to ensure the pavement condition is at least acceptable, right? To not, have kind of issues with bike tires, getting into cracks and things like that, right? So, I would want or hope that city staff, before they issue any kind of permits, would inspect the condition of the pavement to make sure that it's acceptable for this kind of treatment. And so I guess that would be maybe an amendment I would offer up to this motion, which could just be a simple slurry seal, right? Which I don't know if that's budgeted in their Beach City's budget, but I feel like that is an important aspect to consider.
This is, as I understand it, that part of this is not something that the city would be doing. It would be entirely Beach Cities. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I guess the recommendation would be that my amendment would be the recommendation that Beach Cities include that as part of their scope of work.
Chairperson, I think what Commissioner Min is asking for is not out of line. I think what we're talking about tonight, though, is the treatment that we want to see on that portion of Diamond,
right,
between what was being referred to as the alleyway and Prospect. And I think we're getting that direction from the commission to go with a class 3 facility and make sure that bicycle detection is there and operational. I think Commissioner Min, your comments are in line. And Jacqueline, I know the project itself was initially looking for a lot of class 1 level improvements, which would have included some surface treatments. And if you can clarify that that's part of the proposed overall improvements or implementation of the project, that would be great.
I'm going to rely on my team here, Ryan or John. Do you have some insight?
On the alleyway itself?
Right, because that's going to become your class 1 bike facility.
Well, the alleyway and the street portion in front of those homes, right?
Yeah, I don't think that the street portion itself is is being proposed to be repaved, but I believe the alleyway itself as just part of the general improvements in the area.
Right. So for the roadway itself at that point, that's something that comes on our roadway resurfacing CIP, not necessarily something that we can condition on a bicycle improvement process here, especially if we're just proposing a class 3 facility.
I mean, all that's before us tonight is the 1400 block of Diamond, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so we have a motion, I think, that's been made and seconded. And I see that we have, yes, Commissioner Glass.
Okay, yeah, I think, you made a good point there, and it's been repeated several times. The area of concern for this commission is between Prospect and where the start of the alleyway is. We have to make an assumption that in doing its due diligence, Beach Cities will make sure that the alleyway portion, which is under their control, and I assume it's on their property, will be properly paved and safely put together for both pedestrians and bikes, whoever the users are. The only addition I would like to make to the motion is we've talked about a sensor for bikes, but we've recognized that there are pedestrians, kids who are using that too. And if in fact we're going to have a sensor there for that light, it ought to be one that is usable by the students who are crossing the street, people who are crossing the street also, not just bikes. It's there, and it'd be a manual system. It's not going to be automatic. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that this is an all-purpose thing we're talking about here for all users. The light should change if a car goes by or is waiting for a light, just as it should for a pedestrian or a bike.
There are, Commissioner Glass, to your point, there are pedestrian push buttons all around all four corners of that intersection. So those are, and will continue to be.
Yeah, the issue is that you need a bike sensor so the person doesn't have to get down.
It's fine. They just all need to be there.
Yeah. So we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, let's have a roll call vote on Commissioner Funabashi's motion.
Commissioner Arata? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'd like to abstain on this one. I'd like to get some more information on the details, and yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
Commissioner Glass?
I'm in favor of it.
Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Commissioner Funabashi?
Yes.
Commissioner Bajaj?
Yes.
Vice Chairman?
Yes.
Chair Simpson?
Yes. Motion passes. And we are now at that moment on the agenda that some of us think is the most exciting one possible, which is member items and referrals to staff.
Thank you, Beach City.
Artesia, you have your hand up first.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I just want to find out if Andy and Ted got my photo from the last meeting. I went out there and took a picture of that storm drain on Pearl and Catalina. That catch basin pipe sticking out of the curb there. Oh, okay. I'm just wondering. I
did. Yes.
Yeah. Is that going to be addressed? Is that part of the drainage improvements we voted on today?
The best I can tell you, it's on my list, but I don't have a specific plan for it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bajaj. You're muted.
Hi there. Thank you so much. I noticed that the South Bay General Assembly just came last month. I know previously, I don't recall if this commission, if staff from this commission usually sends out an email or some like kind of forwards on any flyers or invitations for that. But question, did you all get an opportunity to attend this year?
I think I was the sole attendee from department, and I believe there was one person from the city manager's office.
Right. I didn't see any email come in from this commission or from the GPAC as well. And I know the last couple of years we've gotten emails from the GPAC as well, giving us a heads up about it. So I'm hoping that, we would get them in the future just in case, just to provide that little extra notification that it's coming, because it's usually a stellar event.
We'll do. It's been 3 years, I guess, since 2020, since they've actually.
Yeah, it was 2020 since it happened.
Two that they've missed, and this was the one that they were able to put back together. It was good, and it will grow back to what it was. I know there were tons of email blasts by the South Bay COG staff, but we'll make sure and get that for you.
Yeah, it was funny. I even checked my email because I usually got the notifications from them as well. And so I went to their website just tonight and re-signed up for their updates just because, they just completely came and went. So I was a little bummed to miss it because it's usually like I said, such a great event.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Other referrals to staff? Seeing none. I guess it might be time to call for a motion to adjourn. Is it correct that we would probably be meeting in person?
Right. I wanted to make sure you're aware that starting in May, council and commission meetings will be meeting in the city council chambers. So you are adjourning to not a virtual meeting, but to a regular in-person meeting. And commissioners, the council has requested that all the commissioners be present in person, no virtual attendance. So that is the next meeting, and we would invite you to come 15 to 20 minutes early, maybe, to get used to the technology that's going to be there at the dais. We'll try and we'll learn together. I'll say it that way. Lauren, do you have to add on that?
I'm curious, are there any special requirements? Are we still supposed to be masked, or are we supposed to all be vaccinated and then that we are, or we just show up and live life like we used to?
There are no special requirements that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I was going to say the latter, Commissioner Simpson, Chairperson Simpson.
Okay, well, let's look for a motion to adjourn to our next meeting in person on whatever it would be in May. Would someone like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. Yeah.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
See you all in a month in person.
I'll see you all in a month in person.
Yeah.
Thank you all.